are recording, is that correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay, Marla, Delilah, rest of the board. Welcome to the Development Review Board meeting for April 7th, 2020. My name is Matt Cota. I'm the chair of the Development Review Board. Also in attendance virtually of the Development Review Board is Don Filbert, Jim Langdon, John Wilking, and Mark Baer. Alyssa Portman may join us shortly. She's texting me back right now. Brian Sullivan cannot attend the meeting tonight. Also in attendance virtually from the city of South Burlington is Marla Keene, Development Review Planner, and Delilah Hall, the zoning administrator. For all those that can hear my voice, let me just start out by saying I would much rather be in City Hall tonight than in my office at my house. But like the rest of the world, we're learning quickly how to adapt. One of the things that I said to the board and to staff was that we need to find a way to conduct city business that protects the health of our members, of the staff, and the public. And we also need to ensure compliance with open meeting law. Remote hearings are how the legislature is conducting business right now, and they have given permission through emergency legislation for cities and towns to do the same, and that's what we're doing because they want us to do this. Thank you for those that are in attendance, either by phone or those that are watching online through the Gotomeeting app, or those that will watch a recorded version of this in some capacity. This hearing is being recorded. It will be made available. Anyone that wishes to participate in this hearing should sign the virtual sign-in sheet that's in the chat box. If you don't know how to use the chat box, that's okay. You should email Marla Keene at mkeene, M-K-E-E-N-E, at sburl.com and provide your contact information. It's important that you sign in or participate in some way should you want to be considered a participant, should you want to obtain party status and to appeal a decision made by this board. And of course, as always, you can also submit comments in writing, which is welcomed and encouraged. To that end, the way we operate, obviously virtually, is different, but procedurally will be slightly different as well. In the normal course of business, when we're at City Hall in a publicly warned meeting, if the board feels that we have received enough testimony from the applicant, from interested parties, from neighbors, from experts, from staff and the public, we'll close a hearing if it's preliminary plat or final plat, whereby we can no longer take testimony and we begin our deliberations. As long as we're doing this, in order to make sure that everyone has the right to speak about any project, we'll instead keep the hearing open in cases where we might have closed it for the narrow purpose of allowing anyone who cannot raise their hand digitally or cannot figure out the technology, which is understandable, it's different, to allow them the opportunity to submit comments in writing even after the hearing would presumably be closed. Now, what will this mean? Well, this will mean we'll continue something that may have been closed for the next publicly warned hearing for that narrow purpose. This will undoubtedly slow down the process for any applicant, for a developer. But it's done with the goal of ensuring public access, which is critically important to me, and I know it is for the rest of the Development Review Board. It's not ideal, it's not desirable, but it is necessary. And this could be the way that we conduct business for the foreseeable future until the governor lifts the restrictions on gatherings, which none of us know when that will happen. So anyways, with that long monologue, welcome to the Development Review Board meeting for April 7th, 2020. And I start out with the first item on the agenda, which is additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items. And before anyone says anything, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to make a change and talk a little bit longer. I'll take comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda after I give an announcement and allow other people on the board to do an announcement. Because the first announcement is, we're doing pretty well so far, but if you participated in Zoom or Gotomeeting calls, you'll know by now that you should mute your line until you want to talk. That way we avoid the tapping on keyboards or dogs and cats or other ambient noise, which is important. We do have the power through Delilah, who controls the system, to mute everyone's line and then bring some offline. We don't want to do that, but we'll have to in order to conduct the hearing if it becomes to the point where we can't hear ourselves. So if you're watching at home and seeing Delilah's screen, You'll see the agenda items there. You're not able to interact with that screen or scroll around. That's Delilah's controlling that, as she controls the mute button. Thank you for doing that, Delilah. The applicants have also submitted materials that you might not be able to find or can't directly link to, but that's all available on our website, and Delilah will have those available. There is a chat feature in Gotomeeting, so you can raise your hand and ask a question. If you're a member of the public asking a question or a comment about a specific development, you can do that. But what I'll also do is when I open up the public comment period, just as I do in City Hall, is I'll ask you, instead of raise your hand, to just say your name. So if you have a comment about something, you'd say, Matt Coda. I'll write it down, collect all the names that wish to speak on the particular comment, and then call on you individually. And just like you do at City Hall, give you the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes, barring any questions. And of course, we can go on longer for that if there's any specific questions that we're answering. Channel 17 is participating in this meeting and live streaming it. And if you have concerns raised about the meeting that you haven't been able to say, we want to make sure that you have that opportunity, and that's why we're extending the process to allow you to submit comments in writing. All this information, of course, is posted at the city, posted on Front Porch Forum. There were 2 practice meetings held yesterday. The other thing I would say, the other part of the announcement is when I ask for comments from the Development Review Board, so we're not talking over each other, I'll just go through the list of board members. But in the case I miss you, or in case there's something that I'm overlooking, I encourage the board members to interrupt. But for the sake of keeping it as orderly as possible, I will hold roll call for any decisions that we have to make, and as well for any public comment, or for any questions about the process. Okay, so with that, we'll skip back to item number 2, and any comments or questions from the public not related to the agenda. So in this case, I'll check the chat board. And okay, so if anyone has any comments not related to the agenda, please enter into the chat board or say your name.
Roseanne Greco.
Great. Roseanne, just wait 1 moment and I'll see if anyone else has a comment not related to the agenda. Hearing none, Roseanne, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to thank the board and the city staff for the work you do for our city. But given the pandemic we are experiencing, the residents' health and finance concerns, and the uncertainty of the immediate future, all city committees except for the DRB are taking a short pause of a month or 2. And taking this pause, I think, is prudent and wise, but also respects our democratic process and shows transparency. Even though the state said you can do things virtually, does not necessarily mean they should be done. And I'm here to ask or question why the DRB is continuing to conduct business. And I'm asking you to take that same short pause as the other city committees. And I'm asking this for the following 3 reasons. 1, the DRB actions are not essential, but they have significant consequences for our city, especially regarding the preservation of our natural environment. Secondly, the condition of our economy after the pandemic could make developments approved during this time of crisis inappropriate or unattainable. And thirdly, and perhaps the most important of all, is that you will lose the voices of South Burlington citizens, which could result in an uninformed DRB decision. I know that there are citizens who otherwise would want to weigh in on DRB discussions that won't be able to do so for varying reasons, to include that they may lack the internet connectivity or have spotty internet and or cell service, and or they may not have the proper devices, and or they may not have the knowledge or experience in using virtual technology, or could be intimidated by it. Also, some people are coping with personal and family illness. Some are dealing with financial problems. And a lot of us are having trouble focusing, and much less on DRB or city matters. These are not normal times. Now, you all know this is no secret that I'm concerned about saving our environment and stemming climate change. But even in the normal past, too often developments approved by the DRB have had disastrous impacts on our natural resources. And the recent example is the O'Brien development, which took down an entire forest without consideration for how valuable those trees were for our survival. And there are current developments that if approved will result in even more destruction. So I'm asking the DRB to take a pause now, as the city has done with interim zoning and the other committees. After the pandemic is over, we're going to be different. We might be making different choices. I hope we learn from it. And who can tell what the economy is going to be like, or whether we're going to be facing a recession or a depression. We're finding out now that places that are densely populated are killing people. And we're learning how valuable our wide open spaces are for our health. We're told to get outside, to walk to local places for our physical and our emotional health. Wouldn't it be ironic that we're out there improving our health while the DRB is considering proposals that are going to destroy that very environment? So I'm hoping that, well, we all know that the pandemic is going to pass. We all know that we're probably not going to be the same afterwards. Our economy is going to be different. Our future needs may be different. Now is not the time to be making development decisions with an uncertain future looming, and when most citizens are preoccupied with the global pandemic and the accompanying health, safety, and financial stresses that come with that. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you approve that.
Thank you very much, Roseanne. Are there any other public comments? Okay, I'd like to announce that Alyssa Portman, Development Review Board member, has just joined us. Alyssa, can you say hello so we make sure you're on?
Hello.
Hi, Alyssa. Great.
Hi,
so we've got all of us here. No problem. You missed my monologue but the most important thing about that for the Development Review Board members is I will make sure that when any question comes up that I go through the roll call so everyone gets a chance to speak and no one has a chance to talk over each other, much like we did 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever that was. Okay, so let's start. Item number 4, sketch plan application SD 2011 of Burlington International Airport and BTV Hotel LLC to amend a previously approved plan for an airport complex. The amendment consists of constructing a 111-room 5-story hotel adjacent to the northern end of the existing parking garage in lieu of the previously approved hotel south of the parking garage at 1200 Airport Drive. I will remind those in attendance that this is a sketch plan, and a sketch plan is a high-level review and discussion where the applicant receives feedback from the board on major elements of a project before it is fully designed. During the meeting, the board may provide oral guidance to the applicant, which constitutes the board's determination that the application meets the purposes of the land development regulations. These comments are to help guide the applicant to a later application that meets the LDR requirements and contributes to the goals of the comprehensive plan. But this is not, when it comes to a sketch plan, it's not a formal hearing. It doesn't result in a binding decision, and there is no vote. The board may choose to continue to a later date if there are questions that remain to be examined. The future date will be announced prior to concluding the item for the evening. Upon conclusion of the sketch plan, the applicant who wishes to move forward with their project will have to submit a complete application. That next level of review includes additional public notices and a formal hearing. So with regards to SD 2011, Burlington International Airport, who is here for the applicant?
I am. Can you hear me?
I am. Who's this?
This is Greg Rabideau from Rabideau Architects.
Hey, Greg. Is there anyone else with you presenting tonight?
I'm Chris Gendron with Stantec also for the BTV Hotel.
Hey, Chris.
And Tom from SE Group Landscape Architects.
Tom,
And,
I missed the last name. Could you say that again?
Tom Hand, H-A-N-D, with SE Group.
Great.
Don
Anyone
Wells.
else?
Don Wells with DEW Construction.
Don Wells, DEW Construction. Great. Anyone else?
Larry Lackey with the airport in attendance.
Hey, Larry.
Hey.
Okay. So, Greg, you want to start us off and walk us through the new sketch plan? We've, for your benefit and the benefit of those attending, we know we've gone through this process, what was it, a couple years ago, but there are some new board members, so don't assume that all the board members walked through that process when we were building on the south side. Now we're going to the north side. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
And
so Greg, tell us a little bit about why and walk us through the plan before we go through the staff comments.
okay, The long and the short of it is we started in 2015 with the lease offering from the airport, and we followed through with design, development, and permitting, and we were moving towards hopefully breaking ground when the last permit we were waiting for, which was clearance from the FAA, was denied. That happened in December of 2019. The development team and the airport got their collective heads together, and we came up with a plan to amend the application in a way that we believe is going to be acceptable to the FAA by moving the hotel from its previously proposed position on the south end of the parking garage to occupy space which is currently a surface parking lot on the north end of the parking garage. Many of the features and materials and a lot of the aspects of the hotel that we talked about previously will remain intact. But we do think this move to the north end provides opportunities for solving some problems that really bothered us during the initial permitting phase. So access to this secondary site is better. We have some available surface parking near the entrance to service the need of hotel guests. And I think it's going to relate better to the existing buildings and to the very important green space that goes up and down Airport Drive. So we were disappointed to have to scramble and come back, but we have a good plan, and we are appreciative of people taking time to give us their feedback. On behalf of the development team, I will say that we are working from home with all the struggles that entails, especially if you have kids in the house. But continuing to make progress on this, even if it's baby steps, is good because it gives us something to do. So thank you again for everybody. Give us some time this evening. Our principal issues really are to discuss whether or not moving the garage from one end of the hotel, the hotel from one end of the garage to the other, if that presents any particular technical challenges or raises issues that the board did not see present in the south side. So we really want to get an okay on the idea of moving to this alternate location and to work with you to sort of explore how we think this in the end is a better solution. So that's
so Greg,
Yes.
The best way that I think we can do this, and this is a learning process for all of us, which is I'll step through the staff comments and have you answer them. But if someone else is on your team would prefer to answer them, or you would prefer someone else on your team to answer them, just have that person identify themselves. If Chris, you want to talk about, say, this is Chris Jenner, I'd like to say, just so Sue, who is taking notes, will know who's speaking, because it can be confusing especially if you're not seeing it live. So that's kind of how I like to go about it. And where we come to the different question points, I'll ask the board members to sound off on their opinion, and then I'll of course open it up after that process for anyone in the public to comment. Does that sound fair, Greg?
Yes, that's perfectly fine.
Okay,
Matt, it's John Work. Could we ask Greg to tell us what the issue? I believe I know the issue, but the issue from the FAA was and why this would solve it.
Yep. Hey, John, you still sound like you're a little bit underwater. I don't know if you can find a different mic. Process.
It's really hard to hear you, John.
Possibly has his cell phone open at the same time as the other mic. You can't have both.
So, so this is Matt Coda. Greg, if you could just briefly discuss why the project that was previously approved can't go forward because of the FAA.
It relates to the functioning of the airport's radar array. It is is a sort of geometry problem that suggests that the height of the hotel where it was proposed would be too tall. Interestingly enough, by moving to the other end of the garage, the hotel will be more or less at the same elevation of the garage, which was previously cleared for this issue. And so it's not something that our team was directly involved with processing, but it seems like it's a sort of immutable fact that the hotel cannot go where we had it proposed.
Okay. Great. Okay, so if we go to staff comment number 1, which is the board in the previous go around when the hotel was proposed for the south side, the board had found that the categorization of the hotel fell under other uses designed to serve aviation passengers and industry because the project was designed and located in a manner that to be clearly oriented to serve those clients. As you remember, the DRB as it was constituted at the time discussed that in depth, and certainly I was a proponent of saying that because the hotel has an attention to serving airline pilots and other airline employees, it made a lot of sense and it fit that categorization. I haven't changed my opinion based on seeing the sketch plan, but I would open it up to any board member who wishes to offer comments regarding comment number 1. John?
I'm fine with it. It's no issue.
Okay. Don?
I'm fine. No questions.
Jim?
I'm fine with that too.
Okay. Mark?
I'm still fine with it. I'm a little, I'm wondering why it lost a restaurant. It used to have a public restaurant. Now it's more just like seems to be just your standard generic hotel breakfast type thing.
I can respond to that. This is Wells. Really, we did a market study to determine whether or not the restaurant was something that would be profitable, and it came back resoundingly that it was not something that would be wise to do. So we just went with the standard Marriott hotel at that point.
Okay.
Alyssa, any comments regarding point number 1?
No comments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 2. Staff considers regarding setbacks, coverages, and lot dimensions. Staff considers no prohibition on the proposed elements within the front setback, but recommends the board ask the applicant to describe how the proposed elements within the setback will appear from Airport Drive. I don't know if Delilah can show something on the screen which illustrates this, but Greg, could you respond to that comment?
If it were possible, I'd like to bring up the slide prepared by SE Group, the colored site plan. And while if it's possible to find that, the idea, well, no, that's our set. It should be a single page PDF from the SE Group. But
It's the last page of our package.
yeah,
I think we
that's
should
right.
all be careful just to talk one at a time.
Is this it?
That's it. Thank you very much. So unlike a previous building, the proposal for this hotel is that it will fully meet the front yard setback. One of the features of the previous design, though, was a fairly nice outside seating area, which you can see here in the lower portion of this plan. There's a fire pit with some casual seating around it and a seating for outdoor dining. There's actually a walk-up window from the kitchen, and there's also a place to grill food. This kind of thing is sort of, it's all at grade level except for some retaining walls and the landscape features that Thomas and Adam have put together here. But it brings active use to this green belt, which is actually a pretty beautiful thing when you really experience it at the ground level. As you go down the bike path now along the garage, there's a great variety of substantial trees. And so this puts an active use into that space without sort of sticking up above grade. And we think it's sort of is one of the other amenities that this hotel is providing to airport guests, as well as the fitness and the availability of meeting rooms. It's not all about the dining experience. But those elements are in the front yard setback. down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see there's also a place mapped out for a dumpster enclosure, and we'll have as well. We'll be screening some a generator and a cooling tower. That is intended to be similar to what was approved before, which would be a masonry wall around that enclosure to keep it with airport standards. But that element would also sort of occupy a portion of that setback, because we're going to have this service drive you see here along the right-hand side of the plan, and I'm sure we'll want to talk about that later. Does that get you the broad strokes?
Yeah. Is there, Marla, do you have any follow-ups to that before I move on?
Nope.
Okay. Good. I want to make sure. I usually that's when I usually do a sideways look at Marla, and I can't do that right now. So thank you, Marla, for picking up whenever I've skipped over something or haven't. Thank you. Item number 3, staff recommends the board determine what information they want to see from the applicant. Oh,
John,
go ahead,
here.
Don.
So you talk
Go ahead,
about the dining experience, but I thought you weren't having a restaurant.
Oh, good point.
Inside this, yes, inside this hotel, there is a kitchen and a service line that does traditional food offerings for the hotel. But there's also a grab-and-go market that's larger than prototype, where we expect you'll be able to buy, pick up and carry beers and other food items. So people who are staying at the hotel and who are getting the hotel breakfast can sit out there and eat, but also people who want to meet in the hotel, say just to have a meeting or grab a beer before a flight. The hotel is set up to accommodate that. We have that expanded market offering. So there is going to be dining happening inside here. It's not quite the restaurant level as has been explained, but there will be food served here, and there'll be cash and carry stuff as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Good explanation. Good question. Okay, number 3, staff recommends the board determine what information they want to see from the applicant to determine whether to grant the height waiver. Let's talk a little bit about height, Greg. How high are you? Can you show us? We don't have any elevations, right? We don't have anything right now.
Yeah, the set that the architectural set that was on the screen moments ago includes includes all the elevations and some 3D simulations as well.
Okay.
The numbers are the same as they were at the other end. The difference here is that the hotel will be as tall as previously approved. It's just going to be happening at the end of the garage that also happens to be that tall. So the roof deck will be below the uppermost parking level on that end of the garage by a little bit.
Wait, so say that again, so I understand that the where we're at now in the hotel on the north side.
Yes.
That the parking garage is higher on the north side, and so
yes.
In a previous example, the hotel was higher than the parking deck, but in this example, it's about the same, or we're off by how much?
I have exact numbers, and I would certainly include those when we come back for preliminary final. But I think it's a few feet lower from the parking surface to the average or to the principal roof elevation here. We have a couple of sections in the center of the building that pop up for architectural reasons, but yeah. So the top level of the garage is going to be above the top of this hotel just a little bit.
Right.
And the numbers are indicated on the elevations, which are also in this set.
Okay. And then can you confirm we don't see the mechanicals on the roof? Is that something we're going to see, and will that be adjusted in the height in the next stage of review, or is there no mechanicals on the roof and you figured out to put them on the ground?
We don't currently have a completed revised design, but we expect that there will be at least one heat recovery ventilation type unit on the top of this. And it looks like we can coordinate that with the design of these pop-ups so that you can see in the center of that lower elevation there. That's the top of the elevator shaft. We're talking about one or maybe two other things that size near the center of the building.
Okay. Okay. And if there's nothing else from the board, I'll move on to number 5. Board, feel free to pipe in anytime. If you have a question that I'm not, can't see you, raise your hand. Staff recommends the board remind the applicant that they will need to provide documentation of the application to the applicable regulatory entities responsible for airport approach cones as part of their final plat application, which I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, it hurts to hear it repeated, but that process, that application to the FAA was in process for 6 or 7 months. I think that's one of the reasons why it came in late.
So the FAA moves slower than the state of Vermont.
We were surprised that was possible, but yeah, they did. And so, believe me, with so much at stake, we've already reached out to the regional office down in Boston and discussed the new location and the process. And the FAA is already reviewing a revised application prepared by Chris, if he wants to chat on comment on it.
I've followed up with them and they're just waiting for comment from one other staff member at the FAA. Is the latest I've heard.
And this is,
Okay, thank you.
I can
Don
comment.
Wells, and Larry Lackey is on the line, and we know we're studying this as we speak, and that we should have some response here in the very near future, and it all sounds very positive.
They were just waiting on tech ops, and they expected any time now, is what we were told. So, or I was told, and it's in an email too from them. So,
thank you, Larry.
And just to confirm, that last voice was Larry, and the voice before was
Don Wells.
Don Wells. Thank you. Just wanted to confirm to help Sue out. Okay, item number 6, which I believe is moot. But staff recommends the board ask the applicant to clarify how many parking spaces will be lost under the proposed plan and to compare that number to the peak parking demand and number of spaces available at the airport overall. Unless I'm mistaken, Marla, Delilah, we can't require you to provide parking, minimum parking standards. But
right, so there's no minimum parking standards except for multifamily residential, but the board does have some latitude to one of the site plan review standards is that that adequate parking be provided. So, you know, to a lesser degree than used to be specifically regulated, the board still has some latitude to determine whether the parking is adequate.
Okay. Greg, any comments?
Oh.
Well, I guess I would offer to begin with that this project was launched in part to help provide more utilization of the 2,600 space parking garage that's right next door. The development is happening on top of what is currently a surface parking lot, and there are certainly, I think there's 90 spaces in there now. We may end up with a handful. So yeah, there's going to be loss of those spaces, but those that demand can just be shifted indoors. The good thing about this application regarding parking is that unlike the previously approved version, this does actually have a small number of parking spaces adjacent to the front door, so we can sort of process intake without creating bottlenecks at the entry to the airport, which, you know, we were all nervous about how well that was going to work in the previous design, the way that was in there. This is going to provide a lot more queuing and stacking space for people to check in and then move directly into the garage. So parking spaces are lost, but I think that the airport has demonstrated again and again that they have a lot of parking resources.
Right, and that was the testimony the last go around. Is there any other comments before the board before I move on to item number 7?
Larry,
Okay,
well, this is Don Wells. I know at any one time that there's, you know, 1,000 to 1,200 spaces available within the parking arrangement at the airport. Larry?
What I would say is even on peak times of the year, April vacation, February vacation, in those times, there's always a few hundred still available in the garage and then also on the surface lot. And that's only like, you know, 1% or 2% of the time. So the rest of the time, there's, hundreds more. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Don.
Okay.
Item number 7, regarding compatibility, staff recommends the board consider whether to request elevations in demonstration of a specific aesthetic facing Airport Drive as part of the next stage of review. Does that sound like something that your team could provide, Greg?
Well, the package you're looking at this evening already includes elevations and 3D representations of all 4 sides of the building.
Sorry to interrupt. Greg, anything you sent over after Tuesday evening is not in the packet, but we do have it available for presentation that you can see now. So you're welcome to walk the board through any of that.
Well, suffice it to say that we've demonstrated they exist. So whether or not they're part of this evening's agenda, I think we can safely say we can produce them. It's interesting in this case that the garage and the hotel meet at a 90-degree angle. Previously, one long elevation of the building faced the garage. So that we really believe in this case that this building doesn't have a back side. The side you see right now is facing the terminal. The other side is where we had all that patio and landscaping we just discussed moments ago. So we expect that the quality and the palette of materials is going to stay consistent on all 4 sides of the building, and look forward to the continued improvement that normally happens as part of this process. But this is where we are now, and any kind of renderings or anything the board needs to help us understand this better, I'm sure staff can direct us to do whatever's needed.
Okay. Thanks, Greg.
Or do you have any questions about the elevations that are shown now? You should be able to zoom in and out of the screen share if you want to. On the right-hand side of the screen.
Matt, can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Greg, if I recall, the previous hotel, when it was on the other side, and now correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say it had a lot more interest to it. This, it seemed more like you're a standard hotel, which not to say is bad or not bad, but the other one to me had a lot more design to it. And the back of the hotel, which is going to be facing Airport Drive, seems very rear building, with that nice outdoor courtyard. And I wonder if there's anything we can do to sort of spruce up the quote unquote back of the building that's actually facing the street.
Yeah, I appreciate that challenge. I will say that these are sort of appropriately schematic for the level of sketch plan, and you're kind of able to get the size and height and location of things here and our proposed palette. But I think, especially looking at it in this format in black and white, it looks a little plain. And I'll just take your comment as a challenge to try to get some more excitement going here as we move forward.
I'd appreciate that. Whenever I've challenged you, you've come back with something appropriate. So.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the input, so thank you.
Sure.
That's a great comment, Mark. Thank you. I would agree with that. Moving on, if there's no other comments to access and circulation, staff recommends the board discuss safety considerations, the proposed driveway configuration with the applicant, as well as the about the service alley. Is it proposed, whether the service alley is proposed for hotel guests or if it's used for proposed emergency and maintenance use only. So maybe we could take a look at the driveway configuration. Have Greg walk us through that.
Yeah, if we could find the civil engineering plan or even the colored plan we were looking at earlier. I'm also going to invite Chris to comment on this in a minute, but because the layout is his. But as you can see, if the terminal is on the top of the page where our faces are and the hotel's facing Airport Drive, one would enter this hotel by coming off of Airport Circle and entering at the curb cut shown on the upper left-hand portion of the plan. You'd go to the drive-through with the canopy, get dropped off. If you had to move luggage or whatever, you could select one of these surface parking spaces. And then for most guests, they're going to go straight ahead and enter the garage for final parking. There is this driveway, which reflects an existing curb cut now that goes into what I believe is an employee parking lot or something, but there is a curb cut there now with a control gate on it. This may not be exactly the same location, but we're talking about repurposing that existing curb cut so that anything that pulls in can pull back out to Airport Drive, including tenants who are not going to the garage. Maybe they're checking out of the hotel and they just want to head on. So everybody would be able to exit that way. And we're certainly thinking anything like buses or jitneys or, larger vehicles that passengers would also likely use this exit. So it's meant to be an active driveway, not so much an entrance for hotel guests, though. And that's the way in which we'll get traffic into service the trash and get access to the electrical equipment. So that little driveway does a lot of work.
Just to chime in a little bit here.
You're talking about is this
Go ahead,
Larry?
Matt.
Who's this?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
When you said driveway, you're talking about the service alley, or explain
Yes.
that? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Greg.
That's where the cursor is floating up and down now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
the current service alley, right?
yeah. It's a roadway. It'll be paved and curbed, and in all appearances, it's going to be a road.
This is Chris Gendron speaking. I just want to chime in here a little
Hey,
bit.
Chris.
One thing that we're working with BTV on is to understand the direction of that road, whether it be an entrance or an exit. There is some, and I looked to the board to get some input on this, but the airport does have some concern with increased traffic on Airport Circle because of this hotel. So what they would like to do is make that an entrance for guests as well. So they'll have an entrance off of Airport Circle, but still give them the option to enter like it is today off of Airport Drive through the service. So what we're calling the service entrance, but may at some point become a secondary entrance for hotel guests. And part of that is that is currently an entrance today. And the airport I spoke with the airport and they've claimed that is already permitted for 100 vehicles entering off of Airport Drive. So it's something that we're considering at the moment. And I actually will look for the board's input on anything that they may have to offer on helping us make that decision.
Well, I would just say before I open up to the rest of the board was that one of the things in the application that made sense to me is that the number of trips will be reduced because people will be parking there and staying there and not having to take cabs back and forth from other hotels in the city. So I'd be interested in seeing how that washes out. But anyone else on the board have a comment regarding circulation and concerns?
John, my take is that it's in many ways better than what we had before, so I have no problem.
I do too. I mean, the one before, this is Matt Coda again, was right at the front. I think this works better personally, but I'd be willing to hear other opinions.
Matt, this is Marla.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Marla.
So there are a number of places in the LDRs that encourage or require the board to limit curb cuts. Greg is saying that this is an existing curb cut, but as proposed, it looks like this property would be this particular use would be accessed by 2 curb cuts. Making that an in and out raises some concerns about the proximity of the driveway to the next driveway. Driveways are supposed to be 400 feet apart. I think they're only 200 feet apart here. So I guess I'm surprised to hear that BTV wants to make it an in and an out. That's not the way it reads.
Marla, this is Chris. Can I chime in? No, they're looking to just make it an entrance. We're not looking to make it a 2-way.
Okay.
It'd be a secondary entrance. Or we're trying to decide whether it'll be a secondary entrance or just an exit. Right now it's an entrance, so they're thinking that their first initial thoughts are that, yeah, they'd like to keep that an entrance.
Okay.
But we're working with the airport and the city and our partners to determine the best solution for that drive.
Okay. as an entrance, it feels a little bit more palatable because it's not generating conflicts with the vehicles already on Airport Drive. As an exit, for it to be an exit for all vehicles feels a little bit challenging. There already is a pretty significant exit from the airport right adjacent to it. But, you know, a service vehicle, emergency vehicle sort of exit, one thing, an exit for everybody is pretty challenging. Two-way is pretty challenging. I think that an entrance only might actually be the best of the options that you've discussed tonight in terms of the LDRs. But of course, the board is welcome to provide their interpretation as well.
This is Matt. I understand that. I agree with that, Marla.
Matt, can I say something?
But
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
All right.
this is Don. It would never be an exit from the parking garage. It would only be a small people exiting. Am I right, Chris?
It would just be hotel guests exiting there. We determined that that was going to be an exit. Or service.
Yeah, but
vehicle.
once the hotel guest entrances into the parking garage, they cannot get out through the hotel, right?
That is correct. They would have to go out the main exit.
So it's a small number of people if it was ever just to be an exit. That's all I wanted to make a point of.
So if I was a taxi, this is Delilah, I could come in here, go like this, and come out like this?
Yes.
You could
Am I
also
right,
loop
Chris?
back around. You could also loop. This is Chris speaking. You could also loop back around if you drop them off in the front of the hotel. You could also
Okay.
You could also loop back around. It's designed
And
to
go back out.
accommodate large vehicles to make that turn.
I could go like that and back out like that.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my issue with
Go ahead, Mark.
my issue with that being anything but really a service entrance or for service vehicles and service access is that the circulation flow for the drop off of the hotel is meant to be coming in on the right hand side, doing a drop off, and then going into the parking garage. If that service alley was to be an entrance for the hotel, you would sort of come in and then have to do like a tight turn to go under the canopy to do the drop off and then go back to go into the parking garage. And the issue I kind of have with the airport not wanting any more additional traffic going through Airport Circle is anyone coming to the hotel was going to be coming there anyway. And that's traffic that's not really increasing. They're just going through and pulling in and dropping off and going into the garage rather than going into the entrance at the midpoint of the garage on Airport Circle. So I'm not sort of decisive one way or another. I just think that the service road should be thought of more than left as a blanket. Well, maybe it's going to be an entrance, maybe it's going to be an exit. I don't see it as being an exit because you have plenty of circulation. Just leave out the main part of the airport and exit, which has a left and right turn lane. And as an entrance, it doesn't make a lot of sense because you're then coming in and having to do like a figure eight to drop off under the canopy.
I do want to just make sure that we keep in mind one of the services it provides is it does provide a way for us to get buses and other large vehicles on and off this site. If we were to lose this altogether, I think that would be problematic for the operation of the hotel because they do rely on busloads of people when they're, hockey teams and the like. So just to throw that in there, I'm happy to leave the sort of directional flow and in that kind of analysis to a traffic engineer who I think we probably ought to have study this and come up with the best arrangement because there are also issues with cars discharging from the parking garage pay booths and all that traffic flowing together. So this is something we're all going to have to pay close attention to, I think, for this to be successful.
Greg, this is Matt. I think that's right. I think we're not going to resolve this tonight, and that the next stage of review, we'll have to have a further examination on how it would work best. So you're not getting a whole lot of direction other than that we want to make sure it works, and we're not sure what you have here is the final. Does that make sense?
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. I agreed. We know what the problem is. Now we have to analyze it.
And then the final bit with access and circulation and staff comment number 10 is that we would request that you meet with the fire department to understand their needs, which I'm sure you will. Is that right?
This is Chris speaking. I emailed Francis yesterday and he actually got back to me yesterday, and yeah, he's really amenable to the site. He just wants to make sure that all islands that he needs to traverse are not mountable but flush. So he gave us his input, but he was happy with the site. Whether we switch directions, I think he'll be happy as long as we can get his fire truck through there.
Okay, good. Keep the dialogue going. Staff comment number 11 recommends the board direct the applicant to submit landscaping. Submit such plan, landscaping plan prior to or coincident with the next non-sketch application for this or any other airport project. That agreeable?
Yeah, Thomas Hand from SE Group is with us tonight. He's been working with Adam Ports. So we have the SE Group engaged on this. You see their sketch plan in this evening's package. So yeah, we're working hand in hand with them, and we'll have a more fulsome presentation at preliminary plat.
So this is Marla. The prior approval referenced in this comment in SP 1935 requires that there's an overall landscaping plan as part of the next application for the airport, which triggers a minimum landscaping budget. That condition exists and doesn't go away if it's a standalone landscaping plan. The airport has submitted their application for landscaping, an overall landscaping plan as required by SP 1935, and that's scheduled for the May 5th hearing. So I don't think that that needs to hold this project up at all. I think that they are on track. I think the board should be excited to see it because it's exactly what that was asked for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla.
Item number 12, pedestrian circulation. The indoor pathway, the staff noticed the indoor pathway is not well defined. Staff recommends the board ask the applicant to more fully define this pathway, which if you like, you can do now, Greg, or know that we'll want to see it in the next stage of review.
Previously approved plans had some interior floor plans of the garage showing where that pathway was. I think we'll just have to prepare those exhibits. So
Okay.
But that is the principal plan, is that we expect a lot of people will cut through the garage. But as the landscaping plan suggests, we do have an outdoor pedestrian pathway planned, and a pretty pleasant one at that will catch up with an existing crosswalk over near the rental car return gates. But more on that when we come back, I think.
Okay, great. Before I open it up for public comment, I would ask any of the member of the boards or staff who wishes to provide additional comments to say so now.
Matt, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I just want to say, I think that this location works better than the other side of the garage, especially from a circulation and like a hotel operation standpoint, because the other one, the vehicle drop off and parking seemed very forced. This seems like it has more of a traditional, like, you know, the parking in the front for temporary or short-term parking for drop off, a much better, you know, vehicle circulation. I just, as a challenge, Greg, I just think that this hotel doesn't have as much of a design feel as the other one did, but I think that the location and the layout works better than the other side.
Okay.
Well, it's John. I love
This is Don Wells. I think that's
Hi, Don.
accurate. I think that's accurate. But from the other standpoint, it's a little further walk from the hotel now back into the airport, and TSA will be far end of the airport with the design that's currently being considered for check-in. So there is a little bit of something that maybe not quite so desirable, but I think overall this is a better location. So I'd agree with you with that.
Thank you, Don. John
Okay.
Wilking, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree completely with Mark. So, I agree both with his concerns about the building and the finishes. We had a really sort of special hotel when we were finishing the first time. And I agree with both of his comments, so that's my take.
Okay. Any other comments for the board before I open it up to the public? Seeing none, hearing none, if there's someone in the public that would like to speak.
This is John.
Okay, go ahead, Don. Sorry, go ahead, Don.
I had difficulty hearing you, John. Could you summarize in like 2 sentences what your concern is or your comments?
If I could make a suggestion, because it is difficult to hear John. John, would you want to maybe type in the chat what your comment is so that then Matt could read it? It is hard to hear you.
That's fine. I'll try to do something else.
Okay, thank you, John. And we can return to that, but let's go to public comment. If you have a public comment, just state your name and I'll see how many we get, and then I'll call on you individually, give you 3 minutes. If you have a public comment, please state your name. Okay, hearing none, I want to remind anyone that is either listening in real time or watching in real time, or that may view this later, that you are more than welcome to submit comments in writing. You can email them or drop them off. If you email them, you can send them to Marla Keene at mkeene@sburl.com. And whether you submitted an email, fax, or snail mail, Marla does a great job of making sure we all get them and are able to read them. Okay. Anything else before we say goodbye to this project? I think I could summarize, Don, what John was saying, and John, I think, was concurring with Mark's comment about the flow, about it being more amenable, this project, rather than the one that was previously approved that was on the south side. I think I summarized his comments correctly.
So I think that's accurate.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And we're not going to vote because it's a sketch. We're not going to close, but we're not going to continue either. If you have another proposal, we'll see you at the next stage of review. Thank you.
Matt, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. You're not going to continue? I thought you were going to leave it open to the next meeting only for the purpose of accepting additional public comment.
Well, not on sketch, we don't close.
Right, but you can continue.
Right, but well, okay, let me ask you this question. Does sketch plan, if someone wants to comment on a sketch plan, us not continuing it doesn't mean they can't comment and we can't read it, correct?
Right, yeah, because
there's no prohibition on us receiving feedback on a sketch plan, even though we're not closing or continuing, so it just is in the
it's sort of in space. So typically, just to give you a little background, okay, from time to time we will get comments on a sketch plan that has been concluded. I tend to save those until the preliminary plat application is received, just because it doesn't make a lot of sense to provide the board with comments outside of the context of an application. Does that sound like a reasonable approach here? Or would you like them, if I receive them in the next 2 weeks, would you like me to turn them around right away?
I think that's reasonable. I don't want to continue this because I think any hearing that has to be closed in which we can't hear any more testimony, I think that's important to continue. But in this case, there's no prohibition on us reading or reviewing anyone's comments after they review this document, and I certainly will, and I encourage other board members to. So let's simply move on to the next one with the caveat that Marla will provide any written comments to the board for us to review regarding the sketch plan that we can take into consideration shall this project come forward with a preliminary plat. That sound okay?
Okay, so I will save those unless, I receive them tonight or something when it's still fresh in everybody's mind.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marla.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yep. So we're now moving to site plan application SB 20017 of Busca Commercial LLC to amend a previously approved plan for a 25,560 square foot, 31-foot high warehouse. The amendment consists of relocating the previously approved shared driveway at 430 Meadowland Drive. Who is here digitally for the applicant?
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Hi, Dave. Anyone else with you?
Tim McKenzie with South Burlington Realty.
Hi, Tim.
And I will add, just
Anyone?
with me a moment, my screen seems to be freezing for me to switch to this next item. So hold on a moment, please.
Should I tease, stretch? Everyone take five? No, I understand. So this is is there anyone else for the applicant in this case?
I don't think I'll be speaking, but this is David Shank,
Hi, David.
contractor with that for Adam.
So Dave, Tim, and David Shank. Are there any disclosures with the board before this is a site plan application. Go ahead.
Record, Adam Boothker is listening.
Hey, Adam.
Yep. I don't think he can talk, but he is listening. So.
Okay. Well, for those that can talk for the applicant and may talk, please raise your right hand. And you swear to tell the whole truth on a penalty of perjury.
I do.
Yes, I do.
You do.
I do.
Okay. So that was Dave, Tim, and David Shank. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. Adam, we can't hear you, but they're talking for you tonight. Okay. Correct. Okay. So let's talk about why we're back here. This was previously, Dave, if you want to go over the brief history of a summary of this project and why we're back.
Absolutely. Again, Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates. What this particular project experienced was a redelineation of the wetlands, and based on the size of the wetlands, the state of Vermont took jurisdiction, and hence the originally approved driveway into this particular site was found to be non-compliant with the state wetland rules. Delilah, there's a plan set that we sent over to Marla this morning that may be of assistance in talking not only about this particular project, 1G, Lot 1G within the Meadowland Business Park, but also it is going to help us talk a little bit about the master planning for Lot 1 that is also a component, the next agenda item, we should say, but nonetheless, Lot 1 is it hosts the driveway for this particular Lot 1G project. So as Delilah
I
works on
apologize
getting
because
that,
I'm still having technical difficulties with it being sort of hanging on pause. So
okay, well, I'll narrow it.
I can see it on my screen, the supplemental stuff that you sent, but for some reason it's not allowing me to now unpause my screen. Another one.
Maybe you.
Let me again.
Yeah, it's a super heavy file. I think that's the technical term. I'm looking at it on my screen because it was emailed, and of course, as Marla explained, this is all available. And if people have trouble downloading it, Paul, Connor, and Marla have assured me that they will make it available for those that.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the one you wanted, Dave?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay.
So this particular set of drawings, there's about 14 sheets, so you'll have to be patient, but nonetheless, it's intended to basically bring all the board members up to speed with a little bit of the background relative to the Meadowland Business Park and the history of Lot 1, which was the largest parcel. It was just under 50 acres at one point in time and has incrementally been partially developed. This particular plan sheet C2.0 that you're looking at right now, in the right-hand side, you'll see two dark circles. That's some of the stormwater management components of Lot 1G. But to orient you on this plan, north is straight up. On the far left-hand side is Hinesburg Road. The road that kind of comes down at a 45-degree angle is Meadowland Drive, and then takes a turn and heads direct easterly. A little bit of the background of that particular roadway is that there was an intention of this being a through road all the way to Williston at one point in time, but ultimately the Corps of Engineers indicated that because of the wetlands at the far eastern end of this particular roadway, that at least under the current rules, that there would never be a connection out to Williston with this particular alignment. So the city, from my understanding, has determined that it is no longer essentially acting as a collector or arterial roadway, but nonetheless it is a roadway that services the Meadowland Business Park well. And in this particular case, we have seen some relaxation from the Development Review Board with regard to curb cuts. And of course, the major intent of connector roads is minimizing the number of curb cuts and basically trying to focus them on secondary or local roads. With the downgrading of the status of this particular road, it's allowed for other properties within the Meadowland Business District to have discussions with the board and actually have approvals where there'd be multiple curb cuts for one particular lot. But putting that aside, what the yellow line on this particular plan represents is actually a theme with regard to some of the historical planning that's been done on Lot 1. And in this particular case, again, to orient you on the bottom right or the right-hand side of Lot 1, which is actually just under 22 acres in size, is Lot 1G, the proposed Buska movers. You've got the rectangular building in the middle of that particular lot. And there was a lot of discussion in the past with regard to noise issues and how to buffer the residential neighbors further to the south. There's an existing earthen berm that the approval of Lot 1G, previous approval, had actually augmented as a means of not only dealing with lights, but also more specifically noise from any of the trucks moving through this particular site. So putting that aside, the primary issue of this particular amendment before you, or basically renewal of site plans, is the fact that we needed to relocate the driveway into this particular Lot 1G. Now, with regard to this particular sheet 2.0, the yellow line represents a concept on how ultimately we could connect what's called Randall Street up on the far north end. That's partially constructed today and currently services one of three lots. The Keller Williams building is the one that was constructed and currently uses Randall Street. But nonetheless, the concept was to come through along this yellow line and ultimately connect back into Meadowland Drive. As you keep following down, you can come right out to Meadowland Drive. If we go to the next sheet, you'll actually see some of the master planning from over 12 years ago that our office had done for Mr. Munson back in the day. And this actually is very cryptic line work, but nonetheless, it represented the ideas at the time of ultimately how to provide connectivity and at the same time to provide flexibility in the development of Lot 1. And one of the challenges of Lot 1, or one of the benefits, is that it originally was very large, and it created the opportunity for a very large business to occupy this particular space. Over time, I understand that South Burlington Realty has been approached by certain groups looking for certain lot sizes, but it wasn't the panacea of the 50-acre end user, but nonetheless, it was smaller businesses. And out of all that, we did a number of different ideas on how to provide for conceptual planning for both facilitating infrastructure and circulation to basically support future development of this particular area. So when we're talking about on this particular plan is the top left, lots 1C, 1E, 1D. If you go to the next one, Delilah, you'll actually see, this one's going to get busy. There's a lot of contours here, but these are the existing condition contours. But the hatched line that's between lot 1C and lot 1D actually represents what's been constructed as far as the initial component of this conceptual through road, or circle, we'll call it, that is to service lot 1. You know, one thing that has been a cautionary component is that we didn't want to go and build a lot of infrastructure only to have somebody else come say, gee, I would like to have a 21-acre parcel for my business, and gee, it's too bad there's a roadway that goes through the middle of it. So we've been approaching this in a way that we basically react to the market. And in this particular case, you can see lots 1C, 1D, 1E are primarily ones that reacted to the initial demands of lots a little bit smaller in size, about 3 acres. And out of all that, we've been trying to go slowly. Now, when you look in the right-hand corner of this particular sheet, you'll also see a mauve green area. That's the existing dry stormwater pond that was part of the original infrastructure for the Meadowland Business Park. And this was intended to basically be a peak flow shaver where water would be directed into this particular spot and would be limited as far as how much water would go out at any point in time because of the small diameter of the pipe that limited the outflow. So this will be a recurring theme as we work through these particular sheets for orientation purposes. And if you go to the next sheet, you'll kind of see this in the bigger scale that actually focuses now on Lot 1G and where we were originally with the approval from the Development Review Board, where we have a driveway that runs just to the left of those two grayish dotted areas. Those are the state stormwater management facilities. The green area is basically a reconsolidated component of the dry pond. And the yellow line represents the concept on how we would connect in the future as future development goals and tenants or property owners came forward. And this particular configuration shows up as comments in the current Lot 1 and Lot 1G staff review, appropriately so, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But we wanted to give you at least an eye view, or in this particular sheet, C2.1, of where we were coming from when we started our work with the state wetland people. And as we move through, we can basically tab into the next one. This is actually just a final thought with regard to some of the green space issues that we had to demonstrate compliance with. As you go from 2.1 into this particular sheet, you'll actually see some large green areas. Those are actually some modifications that were made to the site design to demonstrate compliance with the 10% interior green space component of the land development regulations. And one of the conditions of the previous approval was making sure all of our plans were consistent with this particular change that ultimately eliminated some parking in favor of the green space. So Delilah, we can move on from this one as far as at least a little bit of the past history and where we are. So this is the bugaboo that ultimately we ran into. You can see the mauve green area, that's the dry basin. But nonetheless, the lighter green area to the left is the wetlands that were delineated. Now, we had a previous delineation that didn't show wetlands in this particular case, but over the years, they've actually developed. And much to our chagrin, despite the fact that it's regularly hayed, that this is now considered to be a wetland by the state of Vermont, and hence, we're subject to basically meeting their requirements as far as minimizing impacts to wetlands and more specifically in their minds, minimizing impacts on buffers. So that was what we tried to do. Now, as you look at this mauve green area, just off to the left of it was where our original driveway concept was, but that all being the background, it basically fell through some of the fattest or widest parts of the wetland. So we can go on to the next sheet. And these are a series of plans that we worked with the wetland division on as far as trying to figure out where the sweet spot was between trying to get a driveway aligned that minimized impacts on both wetlands and buffers, and at the same time didn't divorce ourselves too much from the original approval. And we can kind of tab our way through here, and if you focus your eye on the driveway that comes out to Meadowland Drive, that's going to kind of ebb to the left or to the west as we go through these particular sheets. And it was, yep, you're doing well. It's not until we get to the next sheet even the next sheet. There you go. Wow. Lots of red, but no, it's a little one too far. Where the driveway alignment that is shown in red is actually the one the state said that's the only one you're going to get from us. And if you look back towards the Meadowlawn Business Drive, Meadowlawn Business Drive intersection, you'll see that we're crossing the narrowest part of the wetland, and at the same time, the buffer to the fat area off to the right or the east of the driveway, we're basically staying out of that buffer as much as possible. Now, one of the things that we needed to do in order to make the state people happy was we needed to keep the road width as narrow as possible. Right now it's 24 feet and the sidewalk is adjacent to it. There's no green space there. Now that's a technique that we've used in other parts of the city to basically demonstrate respect for wetland crossings and minimizing footprint impacts. And that's what we generally employed here in order to get concurrence with the state. However, this sheet is the first time that you're going to see something on the far right-hand side, which is, again, kind of a shaded red strip. And what that is a new or a proposed curb cut that basically would be an egress only. It's 20 feet wide. And what it does is it replaces the circulation on the north part of the building. So originally we had a driveway that basically ran 360 degrees around and allowed the trucks to basically come into the site, drive around, and then go back out the main driveway. However, the state said that they felt that there was too much impact associated with that. In fact, you can see that particular driveway out front, yeah, there you go. Thank good work, Delilah. That's the original previous design before we jumped into this particular approach. And other things that we did to basically move the building further away from the wetland was we modified the grading of the berm. We didn't lower it, but we modified the grading of the berm so it was a little bit steeper. We felt that actually that would do an even better job of basically deflecting noise rather than up and over, but back towards the site. And that all being the background, the only way that we could get this particular site to work and to comply with the state's requirement of not having that access out front was to basically put that egress road, the 20-footer on the top right-hand side of the site, in a portion of the property that wasn't being used. So that was basically the thought of trying to be as efficient as possible with the property, but at the same time at the risk of creating one new curb cut. So that being the background, we also, in working with the state, if we go to the next sheet, we started playing around with, well, is there something we're missing here? Is a different orientation of this building going to be a better way or better use of the land in this particular area? And here you can see we rotated the footprint of the building and the pavement around it 45 degrees and held the berm down on the south end as a control point. And here it just didn't seem to do a lot for us. It didn't get us out of the red area the state wetland people wanted us to avoid. So we didn't really spend a lot of time on this one. It did take up more land than the original concept, and as such, we didn't spend a lot more time on that one. The next sheet basically is the extreme where we rotate everything 90 degrees, and in this particular case, it went counterclockwise, trying to figure out how to still create circulation around the building and be efficient with land use. And here, one of the things that's interesting is that we actually end up with a lot more unused land in the north-south direction, but it does extend westerly out into the remaining portions of Lot 1 in a way that, again, just seemed to be inconsistent with trying to be efficient with land use. Other things to keep in mind is that, when it came to the master planning of Lot 1 and how this particular circle road would all work, we wanted to basically make sure that we didn't start encroaching too far in that particular direction either. So ultimately, when we go to the next sheet, you see where we've actually made some revisions to the what I'll call the common drive on lot 1. Delilah, I didn't know if you could highlight the driveway coming off of Meadowland Drive and working our way up through. But what we've tried to do here is, again, take the alignment that's allowed from that has been signed off by the state.
Dave, you
And then
can
as
draw
soon
through it. Sorry, Dave, you can draw. I've made it so if you want to take the pen and draw on it, you can.
Oh, okay, cool. I think. Well, maybe I'm not picking up, but it's not important right now. So what many of the staff comments talked about the fact that, hey, if we're going to adopt this idea of ultimately a circle road perhaps being the ultimate solution to lot 1 future development, let's at least make sure that the initial leg that comes off Meadowland Drive actually looks more like a public road as opposed to a glorified driveway. And the plans that are currently on file with the board, this one's not. This was just barely given to staff, but it was given just for discussion purposes. Tries to make the primary road coming off of Meadowland Drive be more of a roadway with a curb cut off of it to service lot 1G. And so at least from an alignment standpoint, and certainly from a standpoint of once we get beyond the wetlands and the buffers and starting to get into a more typical road section, it gives us the opportunity to tell a better story with regard to ultimately how this particular infrastructure can service the remaining portions of lot 1 in the future and isn't held captive of lot 1G and its driveway configuration. And I think that's kind of our broad brush of past history, the thoughts that were put into not only lot 1G and what we were trying to do there in order to basically still provide for a circulation pattern around the building that served the needs of the client, but at the same time also with this last plan provides the ability of this driveway to service more as a future roadway infrastructure for lot 1 in a manner more consistent with the expectations of the land development regulations. I've said enough for now.
All right, David, thank you very much. If there are no other clarifying comments or questions from the board, we could step to the staff comments, which would, I think, provide more context to your broad overview, if that's okay. Mr. Marshall. So staff comment number 1, staff recommends the board consider that this purpose statement, when considering the proposed driveways relocation's impact on the developability of the remainder of the undeveloped parcels on the south side of Meadowland Drive, which are owned by the same entity. That purpose statement is in our land development regulations, which describes industrial open space district to provide for suitable high location, large lot office, light industrial, and research uses in the areas of the city with access to major arterial routes and Burlington International Airport. The industrial open space district regulations and standards are intended to allow for high quality plan developments that preserve the generally open character of the district, minimize the impacts on natural resources and water quality, and enhance the visual quality of approaches to the city while providing suitable locations for employment and business growth. This location and the architectural design of buildings in a manner that preserves these qualities is strongly encouraged. Okay. We're not changing the building. If I could summarize your summary, we're not changing the building. You've looked at different ways of realigning the footprint. You've come to the conclusion that we can't go in through the outdoor or out through the indoor, that you need that second curb cut in order to get trucks out. You've got to provide connectivity to lot 1. This is the solution that you've come up with.
Matt, can I interject for a second?
Sure.
This is Marla. I think that one other point that I'd like to ask Dave to touch on is, in our experience, this board most recently with Dorset Meadows, but for other projects as well, Cider Mill, I think, was one example. The DEC wetlands has been strongly against allowing more than one wetland crossing to access a development area. So I'm wondering if Dave could speak to that and the potential for Randall Street to become a loop road.
yes, I'm happy to do that. It may come at the risk of asking Delilah to go back to one of the sheets that we had up earlier in order to basically tell that story. If you can go to the first sheet.
David, is this the one with the wetlands? Is that what you're looking for? Or no, you're looking for this one. Okay.
Nope. Oh, this one's good. And what Marla points out is that if we start up by lot 1C and Randall Street and proceed off of Meadowland Drive and then pick up the yellow line, there is a crossing of Potash Brook. And there's no guarantees that the state or the city will provide authorizations for that particular crossing, and appropriately colored. And as far as the ability for this to become a circle road in the future, it obviously depends on the ability to cross Potash Brook. In the alternate, we're looking at perhaps 2 dead-end streets that would be required to basically address the development needs of Lot 1. And you can see on Randall Street that there's a hammerhead turnaround that's in place today that services the turnaround needs in that particular area. And ultimately there will be perhaps a discussion of extending that particular roadway further south and across Potash Brook, again, depending on what the demands of the market or the opportunities of the market should place here. Now, in this particular case, this particular plan shows a hooked yellow line that the last sheet of this particular set would actually smooth out significantly. So that was one of the intent of the last sheet, was to show ultimately how we would be smoothing the road out. That services Lot 1G and would serve, I'll call it the south half of Lot 1 or the south side of Potash Brook. How these come together will depend in time on what opportunities and other ideas come forward as far as development on this particular Lot 1 area. It has been made clear from the Public Works Director that he has no interest in recommending to the City Council that the Randall Street be a public road until there is more tenants on it, but he would also prefer in his perfect world that it actually be a loop road that comes back on Meadowland Drive. Not to say that that's going to vary your decisions in the future, but nonetheless, that's at least what we've been told so far. So we are basically taking this as being, there was a development opportunity on the north half of Lot 1. There was a development opportunity on the south half that basically, as far as the size and configuration of the lot, coupled with some of the master plan ideas of connectivity roadways, that this particular portion of Lot 1, which we now call Lot 1G, made sense. We've started to lose some land, obviously, with the state's requirements as far as relocating the driveway, but that's what we have to do. So that being the background, that is kind of lost sight of the question, but nonetheless, that's the background of where we're at.
David, this is Matt Code. If I could go back to Marla's point, which is, Marla, do I have this correct? Is it the concern that, as you described, that the state says only one crossing, that having that outlet, that egress, would negate the ability to put the connection over Potash Brook? Is that what you were referring to, Marla?
No, so the second egress does not involve wetlands.
So what is the concern about the second?
Yeah, the 2 crossings would be Potash Brook and where the applicant has negotiated with DEC to locate the driveway in their current application.
Okay, so what you're saying is that if the drive, you're more assured to be able to make that connection if that driveway is in fact not in a wetland, which would only be if it was on the other side of the building, which is not an option presented here. nor maybe it can't be. So in fact, the owner of the property, who I expect to hear from soon, because I know he's on the line, would essentially be taking the risk that that connection would never be made if in fact we approve this road. Do I have that right?
Yes, that latter point is exactly the point I was making.
Well, I'd certainly, on this point, I'd certainly like to hear from the owner, but I want to hear from the board as well.
So this is John. I'm sorry, I might be missing something, but I only see one crossing of Potash Brook here.
So I'm drawing a circle around Potash Brook, and then up here is also a wetland. It's not a stream, it's just a
Okay. Oh.
So essentially, Don, is if and Marla, please correct me.
One's
What this analysis is saying is that yes, we can approve this this one connection over this area. However, that may be problematic for the property owner who wishes to make a connection to Lot 1 in the future.
Right.
Or maybe not. But I certainly would like to hear from Mr. McKenzie regarding this.
Thank you.
Is this Tim?
Yes, this is Tim.
Okay.
We understand that at some point in the future, it is possible that the state does not allow us to extend Randall Road. But we see the difficulty. We think it would be extremely difficult to develop the rest of the park, having to extend Randall Road to make any future development projects, right? I mean, if we had to extend Randall Road down to the Busca lot at this point, it would be cost prohibitive. There's no way that we could do it. We would also be dividing Lot 1 into parcels that we don't know if they're useful sizes. We have a minimum of a 3-acre lot size. You see right in the middle of the parcel where it says, I think it says Lot 1, but where the lot or the topography is tight. Yeah, right there. That's a ledge cropping. How we, you know, if we divide off a 3-acre lot, we have a road runs through it, and our next prospect comes by and says, I need 4 acres. It just doesn't seem to make sense to us. So right now, if we get the access road that we're looking for, crossing the wetlands along Meadowlands Drive, we can at least service the back of Lot 1, and we know that we could surface it from that way, and hopefully at some point in the future we could connect them, but we understand that it's uncertain.
And Marla, if that were the case, in fact, that connection over Potash Brook never in fact happened because it wouldn't be allowed in the future. But that plot of land where it says limits of existing right there could be developed. There is a connection here where it says where the yellow line starts, and this driveway would become still be a private driveway. Is that correct, or would that be a public road that takes it to the 2 different properties?
If it's a dead-end street, the city is unlikely to accept it as a public road.
Right.
If it serves more than one building, it should be built to private road standards rather than driveway standards, which I think is what Dave is showing in his last sheet of this presentation.
Okay.
Excuse me, hey, Dave Marshall, how many acres are left in Lot 1?
21.7.
Could you say that again, Dave? I couldn't. The first part was garbled. How many acres?
21.7.
21.7. Thank you.
So we would anticipate, a handful of lots being serviced off of that access road.
Which is the extension of Randall Street.
No, it would be the extension of what's now would be built now as the Busca driveway. drive
Okay.
in. So we would extend that towards the back of lot 1, correct, back into there. If we are, if we are unable to connect it to Randall Street.
So in other words, if I could summarize, Tim, the opportunity lost of not being able to connect Randall Street as a loop back to Meadowland Drive does not prohibit the ability to do what we wish to occur, which is to build out our industrial zone here in terms of, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Any other board members or staff have any comments regarding question 1 before I go to 2? Okay. All right, this is the question I have here. Is staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant whether they have considered such a configuration. Staff considers the applicant must demonstrate they have minimized the number of curb cuts and impervious surface in order for the board to consider this criterion met. And that's the supplemental standards for industrial airport districts. David, Marshall?
The 14-page document that we went through did show some alternate orientations. And actually, it was conservative in the fact that it didn't actually show the 360-degree component around all the way around the building. Nonetheless, we felt that based on some of the master planning of Lot 1 as well as just efficient use of land, that we had found a way to basically utilize this particular area on the far right-hand side for this particular use in a way that fit fairly well, except for that one component where we needed to eliminate the pavement in front of the building that represented the last 360-degree leg around the structure. And that's really what we're talking about right now is whether or not the egress, the one-way out curb cut is acceptable or not.
And under this configuration, as opposed to the 45-degree and the 90-degree angle, David, it's less impervious surface. Is that correct?
I think this particular proposal is slightly more than what the board had previously approved, and it's slightly less efficient. But nonetheless, as we move the building further away from Meadowland Drive, the driveways get longer. But I'm not sure if I'm prepared to answer the question to an extra level of degree as far as exactly how much additional impervious area we're talking about there.
Okay. Any other comments from the board or staff regarding staff comment number 2? Staff comment number 3, staff recommends the board require the applicant to demonstrate how their proposed configuration minimizes the number of curb cuts required for the remaining undeveloped portions of Lot 1. If the proposed driveway is intended to substitute for Randall Street, staff recommends the board request the applicant propose a condition that represents a commitment to using the proposed driveway to access the remainder of Lot 1 instead of Randall Street. And we talked about that prior to me reading that comment. So the question I have for the applicant and for staff is, representing a commitment to using the proposed driveway to access the remainder of Lot 1s and any other development that might occur there. Do we have to consider whether to change the standards? Right now it's built to a private driveway standards. Would we ask a condition to change that, or is that sufficient to develop 1, 2, 3 other properties within Lot 1?
Matt, this is Marla. I think that Dave's final slide in his presentation does show how that can work. And if the board is satisfied with that configuration that's sort of at the end of the night, I would recommend that the board require the applicant to update their plans to reflect that change.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I think a lot of the other comments are going to feed in, like we said in the cover letter, a lot of the comments are all pretty much the same comment. And so it'd be good at the end to sort of summarize, is this what we want the applicant to do? One more slide, Delilah. And then if so, just update the plans to reflect this.
Right. Okay. See comment number 3, number 4, see comment number 3 above regarding site plan review standards. Comment number 5, the proposed sidewalk along the shared access drive ends without providing a clear pedestrian route to Main or any other building entrance with consideration for the large scale vehicles using the property. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to reconfigure the sidewalk to provide a safe route to the building. Additional comments on pedestrian movement are included in the staff comments for SB 20016. David, your reaction to that comment, that recommendation?
Dave Marshall, we took that to heart. We concur with staff's comment with regard to pedestrians and the incomplete nature of how to basically get them into the building. This particular concept plan that is brand new to everybody today, again, starts out at Meadowland Drive, and then once we get beyond a certain point, we start to create the green space, the separation between the sidewalk and the roadway itself, and then we provide a dedicated sidewalk that enters the front portion of the proposed building where the office component is located. So this is a much better way to basically move pedestrians into the site.
We're back. David?
Presentation of the intent of staff's comments, we believe. We think there still can be better refinements given the opportunity, but nonetheless, this was really the primary goal of identifying how to make the Buska driveway more a Lot 1 driveway or common drive or roadway that would basically service the future development of the southern half of Lot 1.
Okay. So if your phone is ringing, can you put it on mute? Or if you're listening to music, can you put yourself on mute? Any other comments for the board regarding or staff regarding comment number 5?
Matt, this is Marla. I was just responding to something Dave Marshall said earlier about keeping the sidewalk tight to the driveway at the wetland crossing. That's pretty consistent with what the board typically requires. Staff would be supportive of that. And I'm wondering if the board wants them to just, because it's only another short distance, to carry it along the roadway for the rest of it, or if the board does want them to do as shown on the sheet that's being displayed now, in anticipation of that sidewalk moving away for the rest of the street as it gets built out. Also, caller 5, there we go, was the person who's got the background noise, if we can mute them.
Okay. Thank you for doing that, Marla. Delilah. Can you to articulate that point? Can you show that, Delilah, what Marla was referring to, where the sidewalk would start and stop under those?
I've got it on draw all, Marla, if you want to draw it.
Sure. So along here, and excuse me if I fat finger this, they've got it flush to the road because it's the wetland crossing, and that makes sense. And then farther along, if I switch to a different color here, pen, purple, they're moving it away from the road. Moving it away from the road, which is consistent with our LDRs. So the question I have for the board is, does the board want to see it more like the red section the whole way? Are they happy with it split half and half? Taking into consideration that this road may be extended in the future, and it'd be consistent with the LDRs to have it 5 feet off for the majority of the road.
Matt, can I weigh in?
Yeah, please, Mark.
Sure. Personally, I would just vote for only the section on the wetlands to be tight to the road, because you're gonna, if whatever pedestrian traffic you do get in circulation, you're gonna be, that's where the truck entrance is. So I'd like to minimize the sidewalk right up against the road for the purposes of, especially going forward, but let's give them as much separation as you can get.
That makes a lot of sense, Mark. I agree with that.
That makes sense to me. This is Dawn.
Okay.
And this is Dave Marshall, just to confirm that we would do that. I think there's an improvement that can be made on this particular plan. We are obligated for the wetlands people, that within their wetlands and their buffer, that we try to demonstrate as much minimal footprint impact. But as soon as we get outside of the buffer, I see the ability to start to create more efficiently than what's shown on this plan, the ability to basically create the green space between the roadway and the sidewalk. So those would be my confessions in regards to how to make at least that particular alignment more better.
Okay, thank you, David. Moving on to comment number 6 regarding landscaping. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to demonstrate 10% interior landscaping continues to be provided with the proposed and any revised configuration. Is that acceptable, Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to page 9, low impact development. Staff provided the above comments to the applicant. The applicant has provided responses on 3/27. That should be 2020, I assume. And that staff comment, not a future comment. Staff anticipates they may have an update from the assistant stormwater superintendent at the time of the meeting. Do we have that?
Let me make sure I'm not muted. Not muted. Come on. Am I muted? Anyone?
Nope, I can hear you, Mom.
Okay. I've switched over to a PDF view of the thing, and I can't tell if I'm muted or not. I did receive
small typo on
the stormwater section, and they are satisfied.
Okay, great, super. Item number 7, if the applicant and the board agree to the proposed shared access driveway on lot 1, staff considers a secondary driveway on lot 1G does not support compliance with these criteria. Recommends the board require the applicant to reconfigure lot 1G to allow circulation around the entire building and use a singular curb cut. Let me try to understand this comment. The applicant and the board agree to the proposed shared access driveway on lot 1. Staff considers secondary driveway. Is this the egress? Does this comment refer to the egress, or what are we talking about here?
That's
I'm
my
sorry, just to go
understanding.
back to stormwater for 1 second. Stormwater had a couple comments. They're really minor and they can be conditions of approval. Yes, that comment does refer to the egress. Secondary driveway refers to the one on the right-hand side of the page.
Okay, yeah. And the concern in the comment is that they're, sorry, go ahead, Don.
We're on number 7. We're on number 7, right?
Yes. Staff
Okay.
comment number 7, which is talking about whether or not, the ideas in the LDRs is that we should try to minimize curb cuts. In this case, I see no problem with having an additional curb cut for the egress, particularly with the trucks. But I'm willing to keep an open mind, listen to, comments from the public, from neighbors who may be concerned about an additional exit, or from other board members. But I just put it out there. I mean, the reason we have the egress, Mr. Marshall, is because the second curb cut is because is it the width of the road over the first curb cut is too small? Is it because there's not the turnaround? What is the specific reasoning for having the second curb cut there where that red dot is?
Primarily a circulation issue. In which we're looking to basically bring trucks into the site and get them back out. And if we had no limitations on the north side of the building, just like we had originally drawn under the previous approval, we would be simply looping back around on the north side of the building and coming out the driveway. But right now, based on the limitations of the sound berm to the south and the wetlands to the north, the only way that basically we could fit in a circulation pattern that basically provides 360 degrees around the entire site is to basically provide that slip lane on the right-hand side of the site.
And that won't be an entrance, that'll just be an exit out of that property, is that correct?
That is correct. Now, it is wide enough for emergency vehicles to come in if necessary. It's 20 feet wide, which is the NFPA 1 standard, but it is intended and will be signed as being egress only.
Okay. Okay. Any staff comments in regard to that? Are any board comments?
Does it have to meet sorry, this is Marla. Does it have to meet NFPA standards because it's not next to a building? I'm not familiar enough.
So NFPA 1 is kind of the Bible that deals with a lot of things, and one component is site design. And the intent is to basically ensure that vehicles can gain access and pass each other. In the past, the fire chief has, and now our fire marshal, has asked for 20 feet stabilized access around buildings so that they can put the outriggers on the tower truck. But there's also components within FPA that talk about access and making sure that, you know, the widths are not abnormally narrow, which would preclude a ready access to the site. So in this particular case, we tried, you know, we'd be happy to do a narrow one, but nonetheless, we tried to basically provide one that provided the fire department the maximum flexibility in regard to responding to an issue in this area. And as it turns out, I'll leave it at that.
So what is the width of that road, David?
It is 20 feet as shown on the plan.
20 feet, okay.
This is Marla. This is not the hill I'm going to die on, but if I were to reach out to Terry and ask him if he wants it to be 20 feet wide, Dave, would you be okay with that?
The answer is yes. We would have no problem with that and would be very happy with a waiver to reduce that if that would be acceptable to the fire marshal.
It sounds like a good suggestion, Marla. Are there any other comments from board, or go ahead,
Yep.
Mark?
Can I ask a question, Matt? David, maybe you did comment on this, but is it going to be signed for egress only?
Yes.
Okay. And then the next question is it for egress for truck traffic only? And will the main traffic still go in and out of the main entrance?
That is correct. You can see that the way we've set up the parking on the west side of the building, that the easiest way for anybody to leave the site is basically utilize the dedicated driveway and ultimately the common road out to Meadowland Drive. Again, just because of the way the trucks configurations and the loading and unloading areas are, that primarily it's only the trucks that are intended to use that, and staff will be advised accordingly.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Any other comments from the board? Okay, I would open it up if there's anyone in the public listening out there or watching that would like to make a comment. Just state your name and we'll see how many we have. Is there anyone that would like to speak about this project?
Yeah, this is Evan Langfeld from O'Brien Brothers.
Evan Langfield, okay. Is there any others out there that would like to speak? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Langfeld, you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Great, thank you. So first of all, I'd just like to say we're supportive of what Buska is proposing here. These guys have been good and responsive to the comments that we have. We own a couple of the units in Lot 2. And we manage that property as well. And this really isn't a comment on what they are proposing, other than just a general statement that the other unit owners who are owner occupants in Lot 2 have made comment kind of anecdotally over the last year or so about high rates of speed coming down Meadowlands Drive around that corner. So it may just be something to keep an eye out for. I don't think that this egress is going to really impact that whatsoever, particularly if it's a one-way, and if it's, you know, the trucks are going to be turning left out there, but it might be something for Public Works and or the police just to keep an eye on that, or maybe it's better signage, I don't know, but there's definitely a high rate of speed coming down that street. That's all I have to say.
Great, thank you for that comment, Evan. Any other comments before I move on? Seeing no other public comments or hearing no other public comments, checking the chat quickly. Okay, so we've got some questions we still need answers to. We're going to continue this. Marla, are we going to continue this for April 21st or at a later date?
Let me check. We could technically jam it on to April 21st.
Wait, before I go forward, Marla, sorry. Are we sort of talked about the entire plan. I mean, I opened SP 20-017. 7, can you turn off your radio? Thank you. But we're essentially continuing SP 20-016 as well, correct? It's 2 different applications. Or do we have to open it?
You should consider the staff comments. I don't think that they're significantly different, but it'd be good to just flip through them quickly for SP 20.
Okay, so we'll continue this and then we'll open up 016. Okay, continue. So what date is the right date?
I guess April 21st doesn't work because we would need comments, or we would need the revised plans basically tomorrow. So probably May 5th.
May 5th. Okay. I move that we continue site plan application SB 20-017 of Bliska Commercial LLC to May 5th. If you have a second, please state your name and say a second.
Dawn.
Second, Don Filbert. Okay. I'll do the roll call. Mark Bear.
Aye.
Melissa Portman.
Aye.
Don Wilking.
Aye.
Jim Langdon.
Aye.
Don Filbert.
Aye.
Matt Cota votes aye. Okay, so we've continued this meeting for, what did we say, May? I just didn't write it down.
May 5th. May 5th.
May 5th. We've continued for May 5th. Great. Okay, thank you very much. Now moving on to item number 6, site plan application SB 20-016 of SBRC Properties LLC to amend a previously approved plan for a shared driveway. The amendment consists of relocating the driveway at 362 Meadowland Drive. Okay, who is here for the applicant?
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Hey, Dave.
Tim McKenzie from South Burlington Realty.
And Tim. Anyone else?
David Shank.
Okay, even though we went through. What's that?
David Shank.
Hey, David Shank. Okay, because it is a new application, even though it's very similar to the other one, I need you to raise your right hand. Dave, Tim, and David, swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
I do, Dave Marshall.
Do David S.
Okay, we got all 3. Great. Okay, so on this project, let me open up my. Hold on, I'll get there. Okay, so in this project, we're specifically talking about what area of land? David, maybe you can point us in the right direction. Marshall, David Marshall.
That's correct. So in this particular case, lot 1 is the 21.7 acre component of the holdings of South Burlington Realty. Now, the reason lot 1 has been dragged into this particular process is because a portion of the access to lot 1G, the Buska project,
thank you.
Because of the access into the Buska project is actually on lot 1, it is not on lot 1G. So any improvements on lot 1G are required to have an approval from the Development Review Board, and that's what this application is about. So as Marla indicated, many of the discussion points overlap between the 2 projects with regard to access and character. And in this particular case, lot 1 is the portion of the property, the 21.7 acres that has short-term goals, has hopefully some long-term goals as far as developability. And in this particular case, we want to create infrastructure that is appropriate to support those short-term and long-term needs. And ultimately, what we had before you in the application package was not in hindsight, ideal as far as how to achieve those particular goals. And in the last sheet of the 14-page package that we provided as a guidance for discussion purposes this morning, provides a better idea of ultimately where we would be going on lot one with the proposed site improvements.
Okay, so let's step through the comments, and as Marla said, many of them are similar to the last application. The board finds in their concurrent review of SB 2017, which we just reviewed, that, hold on, I lost it there, that the applicant may use the proposed shared access driveway to access lot 1G. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to reconfigure the driveway as discussed later in this document in order to demonstrate compliance with this criterion. Okay. Number two, as discussed in staff comments for SB 2017, staff recommends the board require the applicant to demonstrate how their proposed configuration minimizes the number of curb cuts required for the remaining undeveloped portions of lot 1. The proposed driveway is intended to substitute for Randall Street. Staff recommends the board request the applicant propose a condition that represents a commitment of using the proposed driveway to access the remainder of lot 1 instead of Randall Street. Again, something we discussed in the prior comment. Nothing has changed in the previous 10 minutes, I assume, Mr. Marshall.
That is semi-correct. In this particular case, what the applicant is willing to do is to represent that there would be no new curb cuts. I think it would be very challenging from a permitting standpoint, whether it be the city or the state of Vermont, to cross any additional wetlands coming off of Meadowland Drive, either because of topography reasons or just the very presence of those resources. So that particular, rounding out the answer is yes, we'd be comfortable with that particular limitation.
Okay, great. Staff comment number 3, staff considers the existence of both the proposed driveway and Rail Street may result in excessive curb cuts. And as a result, recommends the board wishes to use the proposed driveway to access lot 1. The board requires the applicant to first address the above 3 deficiencies and second propose the condition which limits the number of curb cuts off Meadowlands Drive, which may access lot 1 in the future. Any new ground you want to cover here, David or Marla?
Not here.
Item number 4, staff notes that either Randall Street or the proposed driveway remain as dead ends. The city will not accept the streets as public. Staff recommends any proposal include a condition to this effect as appropriate to the ultimate approved roadway configuration. That's understood, correct, Mr. Marshall? Do you want to, are you agreeable to a condition to this effect?
I don't know if we want to basically accept a condition. I think in this particular case, we'd like to allow the project to remain fluid depending on what public policy changes over time. So I think at this point in time, we'd like to avoid a condition and then basically just follow whatever Public Works and the City Council chooses to adopt as far as a policy on acceptance of streets.
Well, so Marla, the idea to keep that a private street would be to lessen the expense from Public Works to maintaining it. Is that generally the idea?
Yep. If DPW does have the authority to decline to accept streets, it's just sort of cleaner if they can say, and it says here you can't. But if the applicant is totally opposed to that condition, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, the reason why I'm not inclined to make it a condition is say the world changes and we actually do connect Randall Street and then we've got this condition hanging out there. I mean, does that?
Well, so if it were connected, then it's not a dead end.
Oh, right. That's a good point.
This is Tim. Can I make a comment, which is on Randall Street? The understanding that I have is that while it services only one building, one user, it's considered a private street. But Justin has told me if we serve multiple users off of that street, then it can become a public street. So if we are able to add additional users off of this new drive, it seems like the ruling could be consistent. It doesn't commit you to take it, but it doesn't close the door on it.
Well, ultimately, the city has the power to accept it or not.
Correct.
Right, so
That's all we're asking.
I'm not inclined to make it a condition at this point. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. Hearing nothing. Going on to number 5, staff recommends the board not conclude the hearing on this application until the stormwater section is satisfied with their comments. We are not going to conclude the hearing. And the stormwater section comments will be addressed. Street standard layout. I think we covered this. Is there something new ground here? Number 5, staff considers the proposed driveway meets both A and B and therefore recommends the board allow the applicant to construct it to private roadway standards. Private roadway standards are discussed below. Yes, that is our understanding. Nothing's changed there unless I'm wrong. Number 6, staff recommends the board include a finding that at such time the Busca access is expanded to serve additional development connections to adjoining parcels other than lot 1G shall be evaluated. Okay, so that finding would say, tease that one out for me, would you, Marla?
Sure. So if the next time there's a development proposed for lot 1,
right,
and it's accessed via that road.
This stupid fucking justice, all fucking righteous fucking nigger.
Do we mute?
Matt, you're muted. No, now you're not. Okay.
Sorry, I had to mute everyone to get that off and now remute, so.
Okay, appreciate that.
So what's happening is I think someone's intentionally calling in and disrupting, and
It's being purposely, yeah.
so we have a couple options here. One is that we can lock the meeting to not allow new people to join. The other is, I'm wondering if Delilah can give me additional control and I can help her manage that while she runs the slides. So I don't know if Delilah, you want to try right clicking on my name and see if you can, because I'm logged in with the South Burlington City account, if you can give me additional privileges.
I can do that. Hold on a second.
I don't know if it's possible, but it's an idea.
Okay. That's Marla. Hold on. Make all organizers. Okay, I think I have you as an organizer now.
So the purpose of the statement would be that anytime that Busca driveway is used to access another lot, it just needs to be evaluated as to whether it complies with the LDRs that say connections to adjacent parcels should be made. So normally the board would require a right-of-way all the way to the property line, but because, as Tim has been saying, the development plan for lot 1 isn't yet very well established, it doesn't really make sense to do that now, but the next time lot 1 has something on it, or something proposed for it, the board should just sort of look at that again.
That sounds reasonable. Is that agreeable, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McKenzie?
Yep.
Okay, great. Item number 7, staff recommends the board require the applicant to construct the roadway 20 feet wide and with geometry and cross-section complying with table 15.1 and 15.1 and figure 15.1. Is this talking about the Egress Road, Marla?
This is talking about the main road.
The main road, right? Which we plan for 20 feet. The other road we're going to hear from fire department, correct?
Right.
Okay. Number 8, depending on the outcome of the above discussion, staff recommends the board include a condition for any approved dead-end streets that the street shall remain private. I don't think we need a condition at the time. Just know that the city has the ability to reject any plan, reject accepting the road. Does not have to accept the road as public. 9, staff recommends the board require the applicant to reconfigure the proposed sidewalk to be separated by the edge of the roadway by 5 feet. That's the earlier comment regarding once you no longer have to hug the street, that you'll split out to provide some green space. That's still agreeable.
Yep.
And then we should continue this because we're not closing. Also for May 5th. Is that right, Marla?
Yep.
Okay, but before we do that, I'll give the public one more opportunity to comment regarding SB 20016. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment about this project? If so, say your name.
This is David Shank. Can I just have a question?
Hi, David. Go ahead.
It's just a little bit about due process. This has been a long road. You know, I don't know what meeting this is. This might be our 6th meeting. And I'm just curious, you know, if Dave Marshall does a stellar job on May 5th, and we work with staff and we have a killer design of the new road driveway, will that have to, the meeting does not get closed, it goes to the next meeting because of the COVID due process? Can you just maybe a little bit of how that works?
That's a great point, Mr. Shank. The process of what we're trying to establish is to make sure that there's no one that feels that they haven't been able to comment regarding any technical issues. So, for instance, in the next week, someone may review this tape and say, well, I have lots of comments that I would like to make, and I wasn't able to make them because I couldn't digitally raise my hand, my phone didn't work, I was muted when I tried to speak. We want to make sure that anyone has that ability to do that. How that affects processes that are continued because they have to be continued regardless is an appropriate question, and I don't have the answer to you right now. The reason we're doing this is not to delay any longer, but to provide that 2-week opportunity. But I get your point. If there are changes that need to be aired from the public, I think we'll refine it as we go. But right now, I think. Well, let me let Marla articulate that while I think about that a little bit more. Marla, what do you think about that comment with regards to where we are if we continue to either 2 weeks from now or more likely, well, actually on May 5th?
Sure. So I think that from this meeting, we know where the May 5th plans are headed. So I don't know that there's I don't know that it's necessary to continue after May 5th because the public can sort of envision based on Dave's slide, and they're welcome to reach out to me and I can send that along to them, what it'll look like and provide comments on that.
And my reason for this question really has just been, like I said, it's been probably the 5th or 6th meeting. There has been no neighbors other than Evan. And I believe the natural resource, and actually Buska actually was proactive with the residential neighbors and reached out to them before coming to the development review board. So it's just, we've been at this for a long time, and we really felt like we worked hard to satisfy staff, and we feel good about it, a better project because of it. But construction season is coming, and he is getting removed from his current location in the near future. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I understand your concern, and any outreach that the applicant would do to the various stakeholders, interested parties, would be helpful. And I know that Paul and Marla and Delilah and Kevin have made a commitment to go over and above the call of duty to let people know about meetings more than just the required mandated noticing, and I believe they will. And I think that will provide ample opportunity for people to provide comment that couldn't tonight. So with that, I would move that we close, I move that we continue site plan application SB 20016 of SBRC Properties till May 5th. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
John.
Seconded by John Wilking, and take the roll. Mark Bear.
Aye.
Alyssa Portman.
Aye.
John Wilking.
Aye.
Jim Langdon.
Aye.
Don Filbert,
Aye.
and Matt Coda's aye. So this item is continued to May 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now moving on to master plan application MP 2001 of O'Brien Farm Road LLC to amend a previously approved master plan for a plan unit development to develop 39.16 acres with a maximum of 458 dwelling units and 45,000 square feet of office space. The amendment is to add 0.6 acres to zone 2A without changing the approvals or use for that zone, and to remove 0.6 acres from zone 7 at 255 Kennedy Drive. Who's here for the applicant?
So,
Evan
so
Langfeld?
this is Dawn here.
Hey, Don.
I just want to disclose that I live in Hillside, which was developed by O'Brien, the O'Brien brothers. And so for both of the proposals that are being presented tonight, I just want to acknowledge that, you know, I have a relationship with them. I have a good relationship with them, but I think I can be unbiased in my participation of the review, unless anyone has any concerns. So just want to put that out there.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Is there any other disclosures before we start?
Matt, it's John. I intend to stay in for this piece, but out for the second piece because I own property on Kimball Avenue.
Okay, that's great. When we open that up, if you could just announce you're leaving, and then we'll catch you next time.
It's good to hear you not being underwater, John.
Yes.
I changed to my iPad, so apparently Apple is better than Dell.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so Evan Langfeld here for master plan application MP 2001. Evan, if you could raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
Great, thank you very much. Explain about this master plan application and why it's necessary,
Matt,
or why you feel it's
Andrew,
necessary.
Sorry, Matt. Andrew Gill is here.
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
applicant
I
as
missed
well.
Andrew. Andrew, could you raise your right hand?
You got it.
Swear to tell the truth on penalty of perjury.
Yes.
Did I hear an aye? Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Evan. Sorry I missed you, Andrew. Go ahead, Evan, Andrew, whoever wants to lead here.
Yeah, so this is Evan. One minor request is I wonder, in the interest of timing, just because it is getting late, and the second agenda item that has to do with our project is probably the longer one. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to flip-flop them, and if we run out of time, this one's a little bit less urgent. I'll leave that up to staff and the board, though.
I would recommend not doing that, only because John's planning on recusing for the second item, and then this one will be quick.
Okay. That's good by me. So I'll just give a brief summary. We have an existing master plan that includes the hillside property, as well as the 6 commercial lots just to the north of the hillside development, but it was included in the original master plan. And this amendment really requests that there's essentially a boundary line adjustment to include a little bit more land to allow for our site plan for the multifamily project that we have planned on the remaining 6 commercial lots.
Yeah, are you able to go? There was a site plan exhibit that sort of would show you guys the whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah, give me a moment while I bring it up.
Probably the
Is
easiest
that the
thing to do.
multicolored one? Is that the one with the different colored zones, Andrew?
I don't think so. I think this is a little bit more straightforward. I can, if you have the application, I can tell you which exhibit it is.
C1? No.
There's just
Marla, was this in the supplemental?
No, this should be page 10 or 11.
Scroll down in the
of
packet,
the
maybe.
packet.
Yeah, there you go. Not that one. Well, either one would work. So on this sheet here, you can see this is the site plan layout for the apartment project that is filed and should be in front of the board fairly soon. And when we were trying to lay out this project, there were just a lot of sort of complicated site features and how to make, the buildings work and to get to the density that the master plan had put in place. And that grayed out area on the right-hand side is not part of the original master plan, but we're seeking to expand the boundary of the plan with this application so that that building and that auxiliary building can be located where they are on this plan. So that's sort of the whole purpose.
Okay. This is one of the odd staff comments or staff reports where I don't see any red marks.
That's correct, Matt. Staff didn't see any issues with this application.
So it's really just a boundary line adjustment.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah, there's two different permits for the project. There was a final plat permit, and then there's also this master plan. And the final plat permit will get amended when we go in with all of the buildings and all the particulars that you're going to see in a few weeks. And the master plan is just its own thing and can be amended by you guys fairly simply. I think this is the only required hearing. So,
right. So
Andrew, this is Marla. You had sent me an email saying you wanted to keep this open. Did you want to explain that?
yeah. So I sort of was when the application got put in and it was like, oh, this can be issued fairly easily. It seemed, without a couple of hearings or anything like that. Whereas the plat application for those buildings that would require this expansion is probably going to drag on a bit longer. We had filed that preliminary plat, and hopefully it will be on for a hearing in the near term. And so we sort of were hoping this application could just stay open until we get through that preliminary plat, because we don't necessarily want to extend the master plan if the plat application doesn't find success in its review with the board, if that makes sense. Because then we could end up back here, undoing it with a different project.
So you'd like it to run concurrent with any decision made on the preliminary plat for the multifamily housing development?
Yeah,
right?
And we had filed it just because it was ready, and there, we sort of wanted to get the things into you guys sort of as they were ready, and it sort of is a standalone thing. But if it's your feeling that, or the board's feeling that we could close the hearing and get to a decision, we just assume leave it open and close it simultaneous with the preliminary plat and issue them both at the same time.
Well, Marla, what's the challenge of doing that versus just the challenge of coming back with another master plan application to change the lot line again?
I was just thinking there's no sort of action required by the applicant to lock in a master plan amendment in the same way there would be a subdivision. So in the case of a subdivision, they could just not record the plat. But in this case, I think that Andrew's point is valid. They would have to sort of redo the application that they have in front of you today to change that line. The only other consideration is the board has already reviewed sketch for the 6 multifamily buildings. And I think that they were generally comfortable with it, with some comments on aesthetics and open space and access to open space. So the board has already sort of given them I don't know what you want to call it, positive feedback at sketch. So I think there's already some comfort that the preliminary plat is going to move forward, though there may be, some hiccups, as we all know. Either way, it doesn't really matter. If the board wants to continue it till mid-May, that's probably the most conservative.
Okay, so let's, any other comments from the board before I open it to the public?
I think we should do, as John, and I think we should do what the applicant asked for.
Okay. Okay, without any other comments on the board, we invite anyone in the public to speak with specific to the master plan application MP 2001 regarding the lot line. If there's any comments specific about this project, please say your name.
Roseanne Greco.
Hey, Roseanne. Any other comments from Roseanne other than Roseanne before I ask Roseanne to speak? Hearing none. Roseanne, you're on the clock.
I just have a question. I know they want to move a line, and I guess there's a reason for that. What is the reason? I don't understand. Are there more houses going in or a commercial building? That's just my question.
Sure. Thank you, Roseanne. Evan, Andrew, Marla, would you like to answer that question?
One of the reasons why we had to adjust the location of that lot line was to accommodate the required additional units per the inclusionary zoning requirement, which we have accommodated in our plan. So it created, some larger buildings, created a bigger parking requirement, which required adjusting that boundary.
Great. Thank you, Evan. No other public comments, no other questions from the staff. I would move that we continue master plan application MP 2001 of O'Brien Farm Road LLC to May 19th.
Yes, please.
Yes. Do I have a second?
This is Dawn.
Seconded by Dawn. Roll call. Mark Barrett.
Aye.
Melissa Portman.
Aye.
John Wilking. Jim Langdon.
Aye.
Don Filbert.
No, aye.
Nat Coda is aye. John, we didn't hear your aye. Are you an aye? Or a nay? Or an abstain?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Okay. Thank you all. Moving on to the item number 8. Sketch application SG 2010 of O'Brien Farm Road LLC for a master plan and plan unit development to develop 82.9 acres with a maximum of 415 dwelling units up to 1,285,000 square feet of commercial space and 22.1 acres of open space and realign the north end of Old Farm Road at 500 Old Farm Road. John, you are stepping away, or you're not?
I am recusing myself. I own 30 Kimball, 40 Kimball, and 110, 120 Kimball, and they're all sort of affected by this.
Okay, thank you, John. And the disclosure that Don revealed is still. I just remind everyone for disclosure, and remind everyone listening at home that this is a sketch plan. Sketch plan is a high-level review and discussion where the applicant receives feedback from the board on major elements of our project before it is fully designed. Just during this meeting, the board may provide oral guidance to the applicant, which constitutes the board's determination that the application meets the purposes of land development regulations. These comments are to help guide the applicant to a later application that meets the land development regulation requirements and contributes to the goals of the comprehensive plan, but it is not a formal hearing and it does not result in a binding decision. The board may choose to continue the meeting at a later date. If there are questions that remain to be examined, the future date will be announced prior to the conclusion. And upon conclusion of the sketch plan, an applicant who wishes to move forward with a project will have to submit a complete application, and the next level of review must include additional public notices and a formal public hearing. So regards to SD 2010, who is here for the applicant?
Evan Langfeld.
Hi, Evan.
Andrew Gill again. Well,
Andrew. Anyone else? Okay, Evan and Andrew, this is, who would like to start?
This is Evan. And before we start, I just want to say that I know there was a comment made at the beginning of the hearing, and I would just like to counter that by saying that we are extremely appreciative that the DRB has chosen to continue to meet in a safe and publicly accessible way. And I believe the DRB was the first city committee to provide remote accessibility during the pandemic, and I think it's a great approach. Recognizes that we're going through a challenging situation. Life continues, and we need to continue with appropriate parameters in place. And the other point that I want to make is that prior to the outbreak, housing was a major challenge in this community and throughout the state. when this pandemic outbreak is past us, it's still going to be a major challenge. And by slowing down this process, it only exacerbates that issue. And there's a lot of economic development issues that are going to arise because of the outbreak that I think these types of projects, which are multi-years and provide hundreds of jobs to the community, also need to be taken into account. So with that having been said, this is the second step of a many years in the making process to master plan and develop the Old Farm Road site that has been owned by the O'Brien family for generations. As we said earlier, Hillside was the first step. The multifamily component that we just discussed is the second step, and I guess this is actually the third step. And it really is the realization of a multi-use, pedestrian-scaled, accessible, multi-generational development that combines both residential, mixed use, retail, and commercial. So it's really what we're talking about when we talk about mixed use types developments that are in the center of the city, that are accessed by existing infrastructure and surrounded by employment opportunities, school, and shopping. So we're excited about this project, and I think it fires on a lot of cylinders for the city in terms of what their objectives are. One thing I will note is that while this is a big project, which staff has made note of, what we are looking to move forward more urgently on is the second step of the residential neighborhood, which are the 126 residential units that are being proposed. The rest of the development, it will move forward on a master plan, but it's really setting up the large parameters, the roadways, the open space, the green space, etc. So that's what we're really here to talk about tonight. And so maybe if staff thinks it's the best approach, I think what we could probably do is just walk through staff comments, if that's how the board would like to proceed.
Yeah, let me, Evan and Andrew, let me lead through the staff comments, and maybe Delilah can access the, where it comes up. The first staff comment, which you referenced, which I would like to just read, just so everyone listening and everyone on the board can appreciate it, which is, it is the scale of this development. And generally, as an 82.9 acre development, this is from staff comments, this project has a potential for as many units as the combination of Cider Mill 1 and Cider Mill 2 combined, or 50% more units in the entirety of South Village. There is a potential for development as nearly as much commercial square footage as the entirety of Community Drive. So this is a big project, and staff asked us to keep in mind to not hesitate to ask more detailed information or take time to review individual elements discussed below. And I would remind staff, the board knows this, but anyone listening that is interested and about this process is that we are at sketch. We're here to hear the proposal at a very preliminary level, that we're not taking a vote tonight. We're not making any final decisions. This is the opportunity to introduce this project on this piece of land for us to offer feedback, but it is not a formal proposal yet, which will be acted on by the DRB. We're here to listen and learn and provide guidance where we can to the applicant. Staff comment number 2, staff considers the optimal layout for these lots will depend strongly on whether they will be residential, commercial, and recommends the board discuss with the applicant the level of detail needed for these lots in order for the board to feel comfortable issuing preliminary and final plat application. So Andrew, Evan, could you walk us through all the different single family, duplex, multifamily buildings and the affordable units, and so we get a picture of the density.
Andrew, do you want to take this?
Andrew, you're muted.
Yeah, I got it. I just was going to say that we had sent over a PowerPoint presentation that just sort of might help.
I have it. So I was going to ask you if you wanted to bring it up. So I'll bring it up now.
Yeah, and basically what we did was if we just cut and pasted the staff comments, and then if there was a visual we wanted to represent or to point to, we just stuck it there next to the comment just to try and help keep things moving along. So we're on the third slide already. We did comment 1. Oops, and why don't you just hold right actually on slide 2 because Matt's question was to sort of give an overview of the whole project. So you guys see on your screen, you can see the sort of overall visual of the plan. I don't know if I can point to things on your screens, but essentially, am I able to do that? Is that a thing we can do?
Yeah, you should be able to. On the right-hand side of the window, there's a little thing that looks sort of like a paintbrush and sort of like a carrot.
Sure.
Click on that.
And then just hit like normal non-drawing mode.
Now you, yeah, try that.
Can you guys see my mouse moving now? No.
No, you might have to. You might have to actually draw.
Okay. So essentially, is that something that's happening?
Yep.
Yep.
So this area shown right here is the area that's proposed for residential development, which would consist of single family, duplex, and potentially 3 or 4 unit sort of townhome style structures. And that's where the 126 homes are being proposed. And so we sort of divided it into a series of different neighborhoods. And the visual that was provided to you guys, I think it was in the supplemental application on February 14th, had sort of looked at each one of those neighborhoods. So there's like a Meadow Homes, a Meadow Townhomes, a North Slope Upper and Lower Home, Village Green Homes, and Mountain View or East View, I forget what we called it. And we sort of given different types of, sort of schematic elevations of what they would look like, how they would sit, close to the road, and sort of what the street views would be like. And this area is pretty well understood at this point by us in terms of sort of the concept. The proposal also includes a subdivision in this area, which we're calling the mixed use retail sort of residential area. And this is an area that lines up with the Commercial 1 limited retail zoning district. And so that allows for up to 12 units per acre of residential development. It allows for senior housing and congregate care. It also allows for a range of limited retail uses. So the sort of concept there would be a mixed use development of apartments and compatible permissible uses. And then the third part of the project is the land that is over here. And this piece is zoned as industrial commercial currently. And what's proposed in that area is, I think it's a 10 lot subdivision with a road that would essentially just create a framework for potential users to come in and to either purchase a lot or lease a lot or a building and to start working or start their business in that location. So those are basically the 3 different zones of the project and sort of the framework that's being presented. So if you wanted to go to the next slide, which I think was the next question, we can talk about that.
Well, Andrew, question number 2, staff considers the optimal layout for these lots will depend strongly on whether they will be residential, commercial, recommends the board discuss with the applicant the level of detail needed for these lots. The board, will the board member comment on what they've seen so far and what you would like to see going forward?
And to that point, and you guys can see the text that we sort of have on the screen, I think that our sort of initial concept here is that we don't really have a crystal ball, and so we can't really predict exactly how these commercial sites are going to lay out. We had provided, and you can see it on this slide, a schematic layout for the area that's highlighted in red here on the slide that you're looking at. So the 2 screenshots to the right on this slide are potential building layouts in that area. And you can see, how the buildings are fronting on the roads, how the parking is screened in the back or the middle of the sites. And we're sort of confident that these sort of nicer layouts that sort of front to the street are feasible. But at this point, we just don't know exactly what use would land in what building.
It's
So
not
other
that
than
dissimilar to what we did with the first master plan, which is that we had you know, a rock solid plan on the residential component of it, and then the actual footprints and the style of the buildings in the second phase, which is the multifamily commercial phase, weren't yet realized. But you know, we're now back in permitting on that second phase, and it's coming out very similar to what we had originally proposed at sketch plan. So again, to Andrew's point, we don't have a crystal ball. It's a big project. It's the, you know, the opportunity that is presented by having a large piece of land under one ownership with multiple zones in it creates a great opportunity in the developer, but it also, you know, there's a little bit of vagueness, and that's why we're in the master plan process voluntarily to work out kind of the big picture items.
Right. That's
This is
right. It is.
John
Go ahead,
here.
Don.
I just want to acknowledge too that the economy is of such concern now. You have to be looking at that and saying what is going to be feasible in the future. A lot of unknowns, and we understand that.
Yeah.
So this is Marla. The staff comment here is kind of getting at the idea of this is a sketch plan for both the master plan and for the preliminary and final plat. And if I'm correct understanding what Andrew just said, he kind of circled that middle area and he said, we're going to be going forward with that, and that's pretty well fleshed out. Does that mean that you're going to be, your next stage of your next application is going to be preliminary and final for that area, and then later you're going to apply for preliminary and final for the area that's highlighted on the slide that's shown right now?
So I think we would be filing for preliminary and final to create the lots that are shown. You can see them in the thin gray lines within the red frameworks, as well as the 126 units. So the idea is to create lots that are available for uses to come in, and those uses would then come through the zoning process for whatever was proposed.
But so I may be missing. This is Matt. You know, large projects, we talk about phasing. This is such a large project. Are we talking about each phase being a preliminary plat on its own, or no?
Well, so we're sort of, I think that that's where this can sort of get a little bit confusing, because we're kind of doing a few different levels of things simultaneously. But this section highlighted in red, and also the section that you can see shaded out in brown at the bottom, are being proposed essentially like just a standard subdivision. So the road would be permitted, the new road that you can see highlighted in green, and the lots would be created adjacent to that road and would be available for development. So not unlike the north end of the existing Hillside neighborhood that's shaded in white. When we did that project, we created 6 lots there that are available for compliant uses. So any one of those lots could come in and seek a permit to build an apartment building or an office building or any number of compliant uses on that site. And this is creating essentially the same framework, but we feel like it's important to create separate lots in that area so that you're not in a process of trying to you're not having one 10-acre lot that you're trying to figure out how to program. You sort of set up a framework where you can bring people in, and there's a strategy behind it.
So if I could make a suggestion, I think what Andrew's describing makes sense. They're seeking, their next application will seek preliminary plat approval for the 126 units in the center, the roadway, open space, and lot layout in all the other areas. And so what the board's going to be responsible for reviewing outside of the 126 unit area is the roadway layout, the open spaces, and the lots. And any other elements of that are not the subject of future applications until we get to that point. So I think some of the other staff comments talk about road layout. You know, that's obviously going to be important for the entire area because that's one of the things they're going to be seeking full approval for. Some of the other comments, you know, talk about aesthetics maybe, and the aesthetics aren't going to be that important for the areas outside of that 126 unit area because they're not seeking preliminary and final plat approval for development on those areas quite yet.
Yeah, and the board retains control over all those lots because we, to Marla's point, we have to come back in front of you to get those lots permitted. So, you know, whatever regulations are in place at the time, we come back in front of you for preliminary and final for those individual commercial lots. We'll have to adhere to whatever regulations are in place. Right. This doesn't circumvent that process.
Right. Okay. So where are we in the comments, Marla? Are we at?
I think we're
on
through 2.
3.
Okay. Staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant the proposed timeline for this application. In with regards to the commercial space or everything. We're talking about everything, aren't we?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of comment 3 and 4, to the point of the commercial square footage, I had said in the blue text here are sort of just reminders to us of what we wanted to talk about. When we initially submitted the application, there wasn't a projection of square footage. I don't think that we know what the square footage will be in that area. The square footage provided, I think you guys read 1 million to 100,000 square feet. It basically represents the maximum square footage that could be built under the zoning rules on the land. So that would assume that every building was 3 stories and that every building had the maximum building coverage allowed under the zoning rules. I don't think that that's a realistic projection of where the square footage is going to land. For instance, if you had one user who was 1 story, you know, you would lose 2 stories of that square footage. And so I wanted to say that out front, that I think that the projection's a little bit high because it's representing, you know, what the maximum could be, and that we're likely to land somewhere below that.
I think a good representation of that is the comparison to Technology Park to the immediate east of us, which was initially permitted in 95 or 96. And, you know, 25 years later, there have been 3 new buildings have been built on the 14 approved building lots. And while they're permitting a new one, it's the scale of this market is going to dictate what is built there. And I think that both the velocity and the scale of it is going to dictate far less commercial square footage. But what we're suggesting is we don't want to limit ourselves right now when we don't know what the market is going to dictate.
Right. So the comment, Evan and Andrew, about this, the commercial square feet east of the residential core being its own final plat application. What's your reaction to that staff comment?
I think the reaction was, you know, if that's something that is necessary when we get to final plat, that, you know, having it progress on its own track is not, you know, a major issue. I hope that as we all sort of get familiar with the project, that we could potentially keep it in one track. You know, that particular area, the review would be fairly limited in terms of, you know, the road and the lot layout for those 10 lots. So without considering any uses on the lots, you know, it would seem like it could stay in. But I think that, you know, we're certainly open to that. It says final plat, you know, not preliminary plat. And so I assume during preliminary plat, we can sort of iron that out.
Okay, great. I wonder if one or both of you could discuss with regards to 5, 6, 7, and 8, talking about open space regarding the parks that are planned, how you're going to preserve environmental corridors, and describe that process a little bit to us about what your ideas are regarding our concerns about open space.
Yeah, the overall vision for the property has always been that it is connected by pedestrian paths, by community rec paths, and by connected green spaces and open spaces. And I think that this plan does a good job of that in an area that's called out for relatively high density within the city. We have a combination of park areas that are more formalized, such as the park to the.
We're losing.
Can you hear me?
Evan,
Can you hear me now?
Evan, you're fading in and out. Yeah, you're fading in and out for a little bit.
How about now?
I think it might be you, Matt, actually, because I can hear Evan fine and you're fading in now.
Yeah, I could hear Evan fine too.
Let me switch headphones. Maybe mine's going dead.
Okay. I'll give him a second. We don't want to leave Matt out of the phone. You
Okay.
good, Matt? Okay.
I'm good. Go ahead.
So, like I said, we have a combination of formal park space as well as open space and spaces that were just kind of left as green areas and buffers. So to the south end of Old Farm Road, just to the east of where it says active use park, that's actually pointing to an active use park there. It's one of the flattest sites on the property. As you can tell by the name Hillside, the whole property is essentially a hill of which Old Farm Road is the crest, so it breaks to either side. And so there's limited areas where you can have a sustained flat space for, call it ball fields, baseball fields, or soccer fields. However, that site at the south end does lend itself well. It also abuts both the hillside property as well as the future residential space. So we're envisioning that as kind of formalized park area. It could have a multi-use rec field, like a soccer field or something like that, lacrosse field. To the immediate north and east of that is the existing historic barn, which we are envisioning preserving and then doing an adaptive reuse. So it would be some sort of community asset, likely for the ownership of the units at the development, so the residential units, the multifamily units, etc. It could have a pool, could have a kind of a formalized garden area, could have some community gardens, but it would take advantage of the views looking east to the Green Mountains. And again, it would preserve that barn, which is kind of an iconic building for the city, and I know which the city really focused on in the rebranding they went through a few years ago. So again, would be doing an adaptive reuse. To the north, where there's the circle or the oval, I guess, that's highlighting an area that we're also envisioning as a potential for kind of a large, expansive, flat area that could be used as more kind of formalized park spaces. There's also to the west of that, where it says park, there's kind of a red dot there. That's an archaeological site that we're preserving, and that's going to be a pocket park. And then you have pocket parks kind of interspersed throughout that create both buffers as well as areas for people to walk on and recreate.
And you can also see on the plan that's on this slide the existing hillside master plan green spaces. So they're in like the lighter shade of green on the left side of the plan. So that's the existing sort of, it kind of looks kind of like a hammer or something, an upside down hammer. That is the existing 4-acre city park. And then the area to the north of that is I think it's approximately 3-acre stormwater pond, picnic area. And then you can see how those connect up through with trails over to the new green spaces. Everything sort of lines up all the way down into the industrial commercial area. And then there was a concept kind of that we've been looking at of doing some sort of a fitness trail style walking loop that would go through that environmental corridor down the page and then cut over towards the Potash Brook and the eastern boundary, and then circle back up through some sort of like trail or some sort of recreational course of some kind.
It's also worth noting that prior to the Hillside project, there was really no public park space in this area of the city. And that kind of football shaped area that kind of divides the hillside neighborhood is a formalized park space. It's graded. It has recreation or playground equipment that we installed there, and it has been landscaped. It's going to continue to be landscaped. So it's already provided an amenity that wasn't there, whereas previously it was private land. The O'Brien family allowed people to use it, to walk their dogs and to go hiking on, but it was always private land. And so what we're doing is formalizing that park is being transferred to the city, so it becomes a true city park. Whereas some of these other parks will remain with the homeowners association, but again, they'll be tied in with public path networks, and we'll be continuing the community rec access that we've already put into the hillside neighborhood. We'll connect that to Kimball Ave and connect that bike path, which currently terminates on Kimball Ave and is just kind of dead ends there and creates a pedestrian hazard. But the comment that we should be speaking with Parks and Rec committee as well as the pedestrian, I think pedestrian and cycling committee were all for that. We did it on the last one. We thought it benefited the development and the city, and we would do that again.
Yeah, just because they're not meeting yet formally, you surely can reach out to the chairs who are sure in contact with the committee members, and we'd definitely like to hear from both those committees, at the very least, on their thoughts as they put this together. The other comment that was in the staff was, whether recreation fields should be concluded in open space. I feel like we had this conversation prior in the first master plan, when we were talking about the oval-shaped park. But does the board have any opinions or comments regarding open space versus soccer fields?
Well, as someone who literally lives on the side of that oval football-shaped park, I have to say that now that spring is here, in addition to seeing people walking their dogs, there are kids playing on the playground, and there are kids playing catch. It's very unstructured, but that's great for kids, and it thrills me to see that happening. So I love that amenity.
I would also encourage board members who haven't, and members of the public, to walk that area of Old Farm Road, and if you don't know it very well, to sort of get a lay of the land. It's such a large project that it'd be helpful to take a field trip while you're social distancing.
If I could just chime in, this is Marla. I think that Evan's point about there was nothing here before, while that's true, if this project goes forward as proposed, there was nothing here before, and there will be 873 residential dwelling units. So there should be a commensurate amount of open space, and not to say that there isn't proposed, but I think the board should think long and hard about what that open space should look like. And I think involving the Recreation and Parks Committee is important. And then I wanted to ask, Evan said that the area, I'm going to draw on it, area up here is planned to be a park. Isn't that the wetland buffer?
Yeah, so there's it's not planned to be like a formal, like a baseball field or something, but there's a pretty large area there. It's about an acre, and it's not in the wetland buffer, and it's actually not treed, I don't believe. So it shows up there like it's scruffy trees, but I don't think that it is. And so just that area is already open field, and it would just be maintained as a flat grass, area that would be open for people to do.
For like walking paths or dogs or whatnot?
Yeah, play, fetch with a dog, or, that's actually quite a large park area right there. Between the environmental corridor and the wetland that's there, excluding the wetland and the acreage of the wetland, I think it's a fairly large area. And some of the comments here in blue sort of go to the fact that we haven't programmed. This conversation is a little bit more challenging without the space being programmed. But overall, I think there was a slide where I had the the percentage of open space, and I think it's almost a quarter of the acreage of the project is proposed as open space. And so our sort of baseline was that at 20 to 25% open space in an area of the city zoned for high intensity development. And that screenshot is showing you the heat map from the comprehensive plan, map 11, I think it is. You see that we're in orange and purple and red, which is high intensity industrial, high intensity residential, and medium to high intensity residential. We felt that as a baseline, 20 to 25% open space was a good start. And that, you know, as we sort of iron out the programming, that can help with the conversation in terms of what's the quality of the open space. You know, we can have a plan that shows exactly where the parks will be and where, you know, what different amenities will be in each location.
For reference, in the master plan iteration, when we did the initial master plan, and we had talked to staff, you know, this is going back 4+ years, they had provided a little bit of guidance in meetings that we had with them that in this area of town, there was a desire to see some sort of park or green space in the realm of, I think it was between 8 and 12 acres. So our open space, green space, park space in this comes to 22+ acres. So that was kind of a little bit of a guideline. You know, again, that was 4 years ago, and it was more in a kind of an informal conversation that we had with staff. It was with Paul and a previous planning and zoning staff member, but you know, we took that into consideration, and I think we've well exceeded that.
Okay, any other comments on the board?
Yeah, I have a question, Matt.
Go ahead.
What's the historic O'Brien farmstead parcel intended to be?
Well, so that property is, the company does not own it. So it is owned by an O'Brien family member, but it's not owned by the company. So, you know, we don't really have a specific say in what happens there. That being said, we have planned our development around the fact that it is a private residence, and, you know, to give it proper room and to have appropriate uses around it. So we have the barn park area to the south. We have some buffer to the east and to the north, but it's, you know, it's residential uses around it.
Okay, I
So
mean,
is
it's
that
just
the farmhouse?
That is the farmhouse. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
that seems to be quite a bisecting of the entire development as essential part of 800 and some units of housing right in the central core of the green space corridor.
Well,
Now, I understand you don't control it, but to me, it just seems like it really pretty much divides this whole property for a large single family parcel to remain.
Well, what I would say to that, Mark, is that if at some point the company did acquire that property, if we were to come to some sort of agreement there, the intent would be to preserve that historic farmhouse and just increase the acreage of the park that currently just encompasses the barn. So it would become just a larger park space.
Yeah.
But again, I can't really go any further than that because we don't own it. I mean,
I understand. It's just saying you're developing this entire corner of South Burlington, and a central part of the entire development is lopped off and divided by a single parcel. That's, I know you don't control it, but it also really does create a fragmented review. And it's, you know, I see the entire area, and then you have this one little pocket that's a crux of how this whole thing could potentially be developed.
Mark, if I could, this is Marla. I think that the board should keep that parcel in mind when they're reviewing the open space, when they're reviewing the paths, when they're reviewing the roads, and make sure that this development is set up to seamlessly integrate that parcel at such time as it does become controlled or as it can become controlled by the applicant. That may be the best we can ask them to do at this time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we would agree with that.
Okay. Moving on to item number 10. Staff recommends the board request the applicant provide a more accurate calculation and an accompanying map of the area of each zoning district, the total area, and the number of units proposed for each zoning district at the next stage of review. Is that agreeable, Andrew? Evan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Number 11, staff recommends the board ask the applicant to describe the source of uncertainty in their potential dwelling unit and commercial square footage numbers and work through what questions need to be resolved to solidify this number prior to the next stage of review. I feel like you did talk about the commercial square footage numbers, and although you can certainly expand upon that, but I'd like to hear more about the potential dwelling units, how many units, residential units you think are possible, and the uncertainty.
So in terms of the residential units, we think we have that pretty well nailed down. That being said, at this level of design, there are still some tweaks being made. We were on the phone with our architects and land planners just yesterday having a conversation about this, and potentially converting a couple of the townhouses from triplexes to fourplexes. So there's still some kind of moving parts. That being said, we are still well under the potential density of this site, and really our constraints are lot coverage. So we're going to be within, call it spitting distance of 126 units. If we lose one or two, if we gain one or two, it's still going to be well within the existing density requirements.
Explain the lot coverage restrictions.
So the
Yes.
lot coverage requirements here are in the R1 PRD are limited to 25% lot coverage. So therefore, even though the density is much higher, and even though you get a bonus based on the inclusionary zoning requirements, which requires that 10% of your for sale units are inclusionary zoning, and you get one additional unit per, is it one or two additional units, Andrew?
Two
Additional
yes.
unit market rate units per inclusionary zoning unit that you include. You can never realize your true density because of your lot coverage constraints.
And the ordinance had made an allowance of an increase in coverage, and I'm not sure that the final ordinance is written yet, but there will be some slight increase in lot coverage allowed by the inclusionary zoning ordinance in order to sort of enable you to realize some of those offset units. But even with that, assuming that modest increase in coverage, we still are coming in at 126 units total.
Yeah, I think the adjustment, Marla, correct us if we're wrong, but I want to say it adjusted it to maybe 28%.
27.5 or something.
Honestly, you guys are closer to the inclusionary than I am. In your application, you did have the potential for 415 dwelling units. I assume that was because you were looking at the area that's shown in pink on your plans on the north as potentially residential. Are you saying now that that's unlikely to be residential and more likely to be commercial?
No, I think in terms of so there are a couple pieces as to why we're a little bit uncertain on the residential density. So the one piece we just talked about was in the for sale product, in terms of the coverage, figuring out how big the footprints for the homes we're building actually are. And we should get you a specific and exact number for that by the preliminary plat level. At the residential rental or multifamily end of the project, which is in the red zone at the north, I believe the application currently says 289 units. There again, I think some of the issue with nailing down the number of units has to do with what specifically that inclusionary zoning requirement is going to be. And so I think it's a 15% requirement that you build 15% of the units as inclusionary, and then you're allowed an extra market rate unit for every inclusionary unit you build. But there's an analysis there in terms of how many units you can fit. you know, you may get your whole 289 units plus all of your bonus units, but you may not be able to fit all of those. And that sort of needs, that level of detail sort of needs to get worked out as the specific projects get proposed, you know, further toward where we're going to be with the project coming into you guys in the existing master plan, you know, where we have the preliminary plat layout and we have the buildings proposed and we can see exactly how many units can fit. It's just a little bit difficult to predict that at this point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, those need to be resolved before you, when you come back, so we'll know, you'll have a better idea what numbers you can have. That makes sense.
Right. And then the other piece that I'm saying here is that, you know, to some degree, the residential unit count can be influenced by the adjacent commercial uses. So if, for example, it was desirable to put something that had a higher parking requirement in that commercial end of the project, that could take up space or limit the parking available to rental apartments and therefore reduce the number of apartments. But I think that the goal is to get the maximum residential density available on that land.
Okay. Item number 12, at the next stage of review, the applicant must provide a requested maximum site coverage. Staff recommends the board discuss what level of detail they will need to be comfortable with the requested lot coverage. You kind of reviewed this already, but any other comments on this, Andrew?
Yeah, so that's I think it's the next slide. I think the comment was, and I'm just waiting to see my notes if Delilah could flip, but essentially in terms of coverage, our understanding of the way the regulations are set up is that the coverage of the underlying zoning district holds true to all the land in that district. So at the preliminary plat, we will look district by district at the R1, the C1LR, and the IC. We'll look at all of the impervious coverage proposed with the road networks that are being proposed in the IC or the C1LR, and we'll look at all of the impervious proposed for all of the single family homes in the R1. We'll give you all of that coverage, but essentially the maximum coverage will be the maximum allowed in each district. And so, you know, that would be what we would be setting up, would say, you know, what we would want to do is to say, this plan is one plan. And so all of the land in this project, in this commercial one limited retail area, all of that land, that coverage should be the max allowed in the commercial one area. So if it's 50% site coverage allowed in the C1LR, in our entire project, in all the land in the C1LR, we would seek to have a 50% coverage maximum. So that might mean that one lot has 100% coverage and one lot has, you know, 50% coverage, right? Because that would, or whatever that math would be. But we would want to look at it cumulatively throughout the plan, but on a district by district basis.
Marla or the other board members, does that make sense?
That's allowable if the board's comfortable with them requesting. So basically, the section of the staff comments we're going through now are to establish the initial parameters for the master plan. These parameters, if they change them, they have to do a master plan amendment. So if they go over their maximum number of units, if they want to change their maximum lot coverage. So there is some benefit to them sort of padding it. But as we've discussed on other projects, padding it too much results in building too much supporting infrastructure. So we don't want them to go too far. If they realistically feel like the limit for this project, and it sounds like they do, the limit for this project is going to be lot coverage, I think it makes sense for them to say, okay, we're going to build to the maximum lot coverage and take some time to think about what the units are and what the commercial square feet are, and not request maximum on those two, but do request maximum on the lot coverage because they know already that that's going to be the limiting factor.
That makes sense to me.
And believe me, we're in a total alignment with the city and not wanting to overbuild infrastructure. So, but you know, again, with the the great opportunity that a project like this presents is that we're not looking at lot by lot. We have the ability to look at it holistically, which I think makes for a better site plan.
Item number 13, staff recommends the board discuss whether to establish Old Farm Road and the East Roadway as collector roadways. Marla, could you explain what that means by establishing it as a collector roadway, what that functionally means?
So similar to the other ones, this is sort of establishing the baseline for the master plan. And if they make any changes to the layout of the collector roadways, they have to get an amendment. So every project should have a collector roadway. There are certain criteria for what makes something a collector roadway. Basically, it establishes a baseline for the project. So having this Old Farm Road be the collector roadway obviously makes sense. I think there's a little bit more of a question on the one on the right-hand side of the page on whether that should also be a collector roadway or if that's considered a local road. It certainly looks like it's planned to connect on both ends, which would sort of make it want to be a collector roadway, but the board isn't obligated to establish it as such.
Is this one all the way to which one? The East Roadway? Marla, can you, or Delilah, can you?
It's connecting Kimball to Tilly.
Oh, okay.
This one right here.
So the applicant's perspective on this is that we don't disagree that that Old Farm Road makes sense to be a collector. With that being said, because of the nature of that road and the fact that it's going to have residences on it, and there are existing residences on the south end of it, we want to be cautious and kind of sympathetic to that, and we would like to put in place some traffic calming measures, which we are working on with our traffic engineer on. It could be, a variety of things: pinch points, speed tables. Right now there are some speed bumps on Old Farm Road, but I don't think they're overly effective, and so we would be looking at some better engineered approaches. The Tilly Drive to Kimball, I don't think we have any pushback on that, particularly if it does end up being commercial. That may make sense. It's when it becomes, if it were to become residential at some point, then our perspective on that might change a little bit.
I just did a quick skim through the rules, and there's nothing that limits collector roadways from having speed limiting factors. It does have some limitations on horizontal and vertical sight distance, tangent length between reverse curves, maximum grade of 8%, minimum right of way of 60 feet. So if none of those are a problem, and you can read it, it's table 15.1. If none of those are a problem, I don't think you're precluded just because you want it to be a speed controlled roadway.
Yeah, and I think that in the past, we've gotten waivers from the board for some stuff in that list.
Yes.
Like a slope, or could be 8%, and that's something that with the public works director is workable. I don't know that we have any major issues with those being collector roadways. Can make sense.
Okay. Number 14, staff recommends the board discuss what level of detail need to be comfortable with the request. And the request is regarding peak hour vehicle trip ends. The next stage of review, the applicant must provide an estimated maximum PM peak hour vehicle trip ends. It's desirable to have a reasonable estimate of the maximum number of trips rather than the overly high maximum to prevent infrastructure from being over-designed, which is an echo of a previous comment.
Yeah, we would agree wholeheartedly that we don't want to over-design the infrastructure. I've been working with our traffic consultant, Roger Dickinson at Lamoureux & Dickinson, who had done the traffic study for Hillside Phase 1. We've sort of I've talked to him a lot about it recently, and I think that the way that we're going to try and structure this is that we sort of come up with some trip end triggers, and we'll probably seek to set those triggers, somewhere within reason as to what the infrastructure that's in place can withstand. And then when we hit certain numbers of trips, that it would trigger improvements. So I don't know exactly what the trip numbers are, but let's say we get to 100 trips, and that means that we have to add a turn lane. We get to 500 trips and we have to add a traffic light. And we would propose that in our next level of review. So for like the IC lots, the 10 lot subdivision, the first building that goes in there might not need a traffic light, but the second building might. And the third building could require, something else. And I think that we can propose that by looking at trip ends rather than square footage or something like that. That way you'll know that when something's being triggered, that it's required, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's consistent with Marla. It feels consistent with what we've done past. I've been reminded of South Village
Yes,
and other projects.
agreed.
Yeah, okay, I'd be comfortable with that. Any other board members have a comment? Staff, item number 15, regarding water supply and wastewater connection. Staff recommends the board direct the applicant to meet with the fire department to understand these requirements prior to investing heavily in infrastructure design. Evan and Andrew, that's agreeable, I assume?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, number 16, staff recommends regarding grading and erosion control. Staff recommends the board invite the applicant to describe their proposed phasing and how it pertains to blasting and earth disturbance. Based on the feedback from city staff on the master plan currently under construction, staff recommends the board consider including a condition requiring city stormwater section chief approval of final stabilization measures prior to being issued a zoning permit for each subsequent phase. What do you say to that, Andrew and Evan?
Well, there's sort of two questions here on the ledge removal. We're anticipating that there is ledge on site. There was a lot of ledge on site on the west side, and we're assuming based on probing that we've done thus far that there's going to be some on the east side. The upside to that, both to the applicant as well as to the city and residents, is that we're removing the ledge and we're reusing it on site, as opposed to trucking in fill to bring in crushed gravel for sub base, et cetera. Everything's being done on site. And I think Andrew, they even calculated that in phase one would reduce carbon emissions by roughly 2,000 tons by doing that on site. It's actually an Act 250 requirement that if you have resources underground that you're utilizing to the best possible extent, and which we have. So I would say that that's to our benefit as well as to the cities. On the stormwater and erosion control, I mean, we're currently doing this. I'm not sure that we think that there's an extra added layer of oversight necessary, because we're working with the state, we're working with the city stormwater folks. We haven't had any citations. There haven't been any issues that we're aware of. And so, what we request is there's a process in place, and the city maintains control over that by, every time we pull a zoning permit, we're going back in and we have to request that. So if there is an issue, you already have oversight.
So I think I need to add a little bit of flavor to this comment, because I did, in writing it, hang a bit on the stormwater section. In sort of a general way, when we had the department heads meeting on this project, there was feedback across the board that the current master plan area got some negative press in terms of the earth disturbance happening all at once. There was some concerns about blasting. There were some concerns about stormwater runoff. And the department heads felt that it would be a mistake to open up the entire 70 or so acres of this master plan area at the same time, based on how the current master plan area was perceived. So I think this comment is sort of in a roundabout way, and I apologize, hanging too much on stormwater, saying that, this should be phased. And maybe from what you've said already tonight, you're not thinking about doing those 3 zones all at the same time. So maybe the permits are just, the residential zone, the mixed zone, and then the industrial zone, and maybe that addresses those concerns.
I think our goal, I mean, on the ledge removal, the blasting would be to do as much as we possibly can, as efficiently and concurrently as possible, because it does create, ongoing issues. The sooner and most efficiently you can remove the ledge, the better it is for everybody. We don't downplay that it is disruptive. We do our best to manage that, and I think we've done a pretty good job. And I think we've done a very good job working with the city. I mean, we have not heard any complaints from city department heads that this has been poorly managed. We do understand that the city has gotten calls during the blasting process. I think that's inevitable. We live in we work in an area that is fairly densely occupied. So I think the city is going to receive some calls, and I think we've handled that very proactively. But I think that's just the nature of doing construction, which is why the state doesn't limit blasting.
Yeah, the communication with neighbors is important.
I would add, to the point, I don't believe that ledge is underlying this entire project site as it did at our first site. And I think that we can provide more information as to where we're sort of expecting to need to be blasting. And we can create a plan, that should address those concerns. We can certainly come up with a proposal that's a lot more detailed than, we haven't put forward one yet, but we can definitely do that. So I don't think that there's any reason why we couldn't say, look, this is where we're thinking we're going to have to blast. These are the phases. This is how we're proposing to structure them and move through them. I think that's manageable.
Okay, thank you. 17, staff recommends the board discuss the applicant the following elements of the roadway layout. To reiterate what was mentioned above, each of these elements represents a sizable project and warrants full consideration by the board. So
to that point, Matt, I've just asked the internet, and it appears that I cannot extend the meeting duration mid-meeting, and I've set the meeting time to end at 11, which I thought was sort of the maximum possible time we could ever be meeting, but apparently I was wrong. So we may need to cut ourselves off after this one, or maybe skip this one and come back to it and go ahead to 18, or however you want to do it. But I'm not sure we're going to make it through all 27 comments tonight.
Okay, so if we were to continue this, Marla, what would be a date that would be appropriate?
We're looking at May 19th.
Evan and Andrew? We still have to get to
I mean, it seems like these roadway comments are sort of the most critical path, in terms of what we would hope to get feedback on. And
okay,
so,
so what you're saying is that we're going to have to cut it short. If you had to pick one question you wanted feedback on, it's 17.
I would say it's the 3 or 4 different roadway questions Marla had in the report.
Yeah, there was a question on the egress onto Kimball Ave and the design of that with the median in the middle.
So if you were looking at my slides, I guess it would be.
I think it's slide 16.
15.
15, 16 are the roads.
The roads would seem to be the most sort of important. I mean, May 19th is pretty far away.
Right, okay, well, let's, we're running out the clock here on our Gotomeeting app, so let's talk about that now. And then we'll continue.
The board can also continue or consider a special meeting, I suppose.
That's true.
We've all got all kinds of time.
I would certainly, as a board member, say I'd be more than happy to do that. I think May 19th is a long way away.
We would certainly appreciate that consideration.
Okay, but we
I would-
have to.
I would
it's a
support that as well.
Right, Marla? If we were to do
Because it'd be continued and this is a public meeting right now, that announcement can be made in this meeting and there's no additional warning required.
okay, so what's
But I'll,
the,
warn it anyway.
right, of course. What's the special meeting date that you have in mind?
Well, I mean, we all sort of have this rhythm of Tuesdays. We could just do a different Tuesday, right?
Yeah,
How about next Tuesday? Does that pose problems for the taping of it and for Sue?
A good question, Don. I mean, the obvious is the 28th or the 14th or the 28th.
So Sue or Channel 17, if you want to unmute yourselves and see if, and say if either of them is a problem for you guys.
Yeah, I'm fine with any date. I am not going anywhere.
Stand in line.
I actually got to the curb and back with the recycling this morning. That was a very big deal.
Make sure
But doesn't another Tuesday night conflict with city council, Sue?
No, city council's
They
Monday.
meet on Monday nights.
Oh, okay.
It's the planning commission that used to meet on the alternate Tuesdays, but they are not meeting.
Okay.
Well, let's if Evan and Andrew can do 14th, I can do the 14th. Any other board members have a conflict with 1 week from tonight just doing sketch plan on this property, on this application?
This is Dawn here. I'm fine with that.
This is Mark. I have no conflicts.
We have a comment from the public. Let me unmute him. Give me just a minute. Dan, can you hear us? Are you there, Dan?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I have to say, I admire everyone's dedication working so late and under these unusual conditions. But I think it's really not appropriate to be having meetings during this COVID-19 stay-at-home time period on projects like this. There's maybe 2 or 3 people on this web chat right now who aren't either on the board or associated with the applicant or taping the meeting. This is supposed to be public. And while I recognize that, people could log in, I suspect that a lot of people who would be very interested in this project don't even know this is taking place. So I don't understand what the rush is here.
Thank you for your comment, Daniel, Mr. Seth. We did address the reasons why the DRB is not stopping while we're continuing at the beginning. Encourage you to review that. And the city and the city staff is committed to making sure that this process is public and they're going the extra steps to do that. And the legislature has given cities and towns the authority to conduct these meetings remotely. Thank you.
We have 2 more comments as well from John Wilking, Roseanne Greco, and another person typed their comment in BPS. They're all in the chat.
Are we able to solidify the hearing date before we burn through the end to the meeting? You know, I just don't want the meeting to cut off before that gets.
Right. We also have to conclude the meeting with the minutes. So what I would say too, we do have some comments which are reflective of Mr. Seth's concern. Hold on, I get back to it. I concur with Dan. This is not a friendly format. It's not easy to see the slides in order to participate in this discussion. Yes, understood. Thank you for that comment, BPS. Okay, so there'll be other opportunities for the public to comment. We're not closing anything. You can't close. There's no vote. This is just a sketch plan. But what we need to do is come up with a date that's agreeable and then announce it so other people can participate and learn about this process.
All right, this is Roseanne
will-
Greco. I'd like to make a comment. I typed it in the chat box, and it has to do with your setting another date to talk about this.
Okay, go ahead, Roseanne.
All right, so you are talking about building a city inside another city. This is an astronomical proposal, and it is outlandish that you would try to rush this, and that's certainly what it appears that you are doing by calling another meeting next week. This is a huge proposal. You talk about things as if there's no impact on the environment or the people or fossil fuels or climate change. This thing is mammoth, and I totally object to the fact that you're rushing this and calling a special meeting, especially when other committees aren't even meeting, and you need their input, like the Natural Resources Committee, and you need the public's input too. This is going to be hugely controversial. And last night at the city council meeting, they did talk about not wanting to have controversial issues during this time of global pandemic.
Thank you for your comments very much.
I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Is this BPS? There was one person who put a comment on the chat, Matt. And I
Yes.
was
Sorry,
About-
I just put my initials in. It's Barbara Service. I agree with Roseanne. I also want to comment about the fact that next week is Passover. I think we ought to be paying attention. Passover started as this meeting was happening. But I think that this is while you have done everything you can to try to make this information accessible, it is very difficult to work in this format. And I can guarantee you, if we were meeting in City Hall, the room would be packed. And I think this is a huge project. We are going to lose whatever's left of the trees in that area. And I think that you need to allow time for public comment, and that scheduling it for next week without adequate warning and scheduling it while the pandemic is going on is just wrong, because this is hugely controversial. And my understanding from Chair Reilly is that Chairman Cota made the commitment that anything that was really controversial was going to be slowed down in the process so the pandemic would not affect it.
Thank you, Barbara, for that. I noted about the Passover comment. I appreciate that. We aren't speeding it up. In fact, by continuing this hearing, we are slowing it down. By not closing anything without giving the public a time to comment, we are slowing it down. So that's my response to that. But the comment about Passover, I take to heart. Perhaps we shouldn't do the 14th, and also it would also accommodate further public awareness about this hearing.
Thank you.
So perhaps we should consider the click on my calendar here,
28th.
28th, 7 p.m.
Works for the applicant.
Okay. So I move that we continue sketch plan application ST 2010 of O'Brien Farm Road till April 28th.
I'll
Do I have a
second.
Seconded by Mark. And hold on, let me find my. All in favor, roll call, Mark Bear,
Aye.
Alyssa Portman,
Aye.
John Wilkins recused, Jim Langdon,
Aye.
Don Filbert,
Aye.
and Matt Kodas votes aye. This sketch plan has been continued until April 28th. Thank you very much for all of your comments. Thank you to the applicants.
Thank
Okay,
you.
now we move on to item number 9, which are the minutes from March 4th. And just March 4th, correct? Oh, no, March 4th and March 17th. I wasn't present for March 4th, but I was for 17th. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any comments, suggestions, or changes, edits to them? If no, I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes from March 4th and March 17th.
Second.
Seconded by Don. Okay. Those in favor, roll call, Mark Bear,
Aye.
Supportman,
Aye.
John Wilking,
Aye on March 17th. I wasn't there for the 5th.
yeah, good one. Don Filbert
Aye.
and Matt Coda abstained for March 4th and I on March 17th. Great. Are there any other business?
I'm an I as well, Matt. Jim like.
Oh, sorry, John. Sorry, John. Any other business from the board members or staff? Well, this concludes the Development Review Board hearing for April 7th. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.